You're watching Noir Lane. I'm your host, David. Remember, every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Subscribe and hit the like button. Join us in the mystery, and let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. If you live on West 35th Street long enough, you learn a few dependable facts about human nature. One is that people who climb 4 flights of stairs to see Nero Wolfe are either desperate, stubborn, or lying. Another is that the ones who insist their business is private usually mean it will become public the moment it touches air. Grant Heller climbed the stairs like a man who had sentenced other men to climb harder ones. I heard his footfalls before I saw him, measured and impatient, the kind of steps that assume a door will open because a door exists. When I went to the front hall and opened it, there he stood in a dark overcoat with the collar turned up. Cheeks pinched by January, eyes steady in the way that comes from a lifetime of pretending your heart never races. He was a city judge, which meant 2 things. He had a title people feared, and he had habits people hated. He also had a face that newspapers like, a stern kind of handsome, designed for campaign posters and graduation speeches. His hair was grey at the temples, and his hands were clean. I always notice hands. Archie Goodwin, he said, and did not ask if it was true. That depends on what you're selling, I told him. We're out of sympathy today, but we have some excellent sarcasm left. His mouth twitched almost a smile. I'm here to see Wolfe. You and half the city, on certain days, come in before the wind decides to join the case. He stepped into the brownstone and looked around as if the place ought to have a bench and a bailiff. The hall was warm. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and Fritz's cooking, and the house had the calm confidence of a place where schedules matter. Upstairs, unseen and unforgiving, Wolfe's orchids waited for their hour like a jury waiting for a verdict. I took his coat and hung it, which he allowed as if granting a favor. You don't look like a man who enjoys stairs, I said. I don't, he replied. I enjoy results. That makes 2 of us, I said, though Wolfe would argue the point and claim he enjoys orchids. He followed me into the office. Nero Wolfe was in his chair behind his desk, a large immovable fact in a world full of smaller lies. He wore a yellow silk shirt under a dark vest, because Wolfe believes comfort is a form of principle. His face was composed, his eyes mildly contemptuous, and he gave the judge the same greeting he gives most people who interrupt his day. He looked at him. That was all. Judge Heller paused just inside the office, as if expecting the furniture to rise. It didn't. Wolfe's silence held. The judge cleared his throat and moved toward the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk. Wolfe spoke as the man sat. You are Judge Grant Heller of the criminal court. Heller's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, I rarely receive judges in my home, Wolfe said. When I do, they are either afraid or bored. Which are you? Heller held Wolfe's gaze. Neither. Wolfe's lips tightened by a fraction. Then you are lying. I sat at my desk and got out my notebook. There are certain moments you do not waste. Watching a judge being told he's lying in his first 10 seconds is one of them. Heller's jaw worked. Mr. Wolfe, I have a private matter. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. Private matters do not require detectives. They require priests, physicians, or spouses. I am none of those. Heller leaned forward slightly. This is not about my morals. It's about my court. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Courts are public. That is the problem, Heller said, and his voice tightened at the edges. If this becomes public, it becomes a bonfire. Wolfe looked faintly interested, which for Wolfe is the equivalent of leaning out a window and shouting, "Explain." Heller took a breath. Someone is trying to ruin the integrity of my chambers. Wolfe made a small sound, almost a sigh, almost disdain. Integrity is a word used in speeches and funerals. Heller's eyes hardened. And in courtrooms, I have a clerk, Daniel Mott. He handles sensitive filings. He handles my calendar. He handles the kind of work that, if manipulated, could stain cases, overturn convictions, and make the entire building look corrupt. Wolfe's voice was flat. Buildings are corrupt. They are merely made of stone. People are corrupt. You are suggesting your people are being targeted. Yes, Hella said. Wolf looked toward me. Archie. Yes. Fetch beer, Wolf said. Hella's gaze flicked to the sideboard. This is not social, Wolf replied. If it is not social, you have no reason to object to my refreshment. I went to the sideboard and opened a bottle, because Wolf's timing is not a whim. Wolf consumes beer the way other men consult watches. He does it when a situation demands steadiness. When I returned, Wolf had not moved. Hella's hands had tightened on the chair arms. That told me that whatever he had come to say was not comfortable to say inside a quiet brownstone, where a cook was preparing lunch and orchids were being tended upstairs. Wolf said, "Proceed." Hella's mouth tightened. 2 days ago, a sealed envelope was left on my desk after hours. No return address. Inside were photocopies of docket notes from cases not yet public, and a note. Wolf lifted an eyebrow. What note? Hella hesitated, then said, "It said, judges are only as clean as their paper." Wolf's expression did not change, threatening. "Precise," Hella said. It wasn't a demand. It was a warning, like someone enjoying the idea of fire. Wolf's gaze sharpened. "And you suspect your clerk?" Hella's eyes flashed. "Number Daniel is loyal." Wolf's tone stayed calm. "Loyalty is not an alibi," Hella swallowed. "I did not come to accuse him. I came because I fear he is being framed or used." I said, "Judge, if you're looking for quiet, you came to the wrong address. Wolf is many things, but discreet in a comfortable way isn't one of them." Hella looked at me. "I know Wolf's reputation. I also know he has a condition." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "A condition?" Hella met Wolf's stare. "That you solve things clean by reason, not by bargaining with the wrong people." Wolf's mouth tightened. "I do not bargain with anyone." I coughed lightly. "Except for fees." Wolf ignored me. He asked Hella, "Why come to me rather than the police?" Hella's face stiffened. "Because the moment police step into my chambers, the rumor starts. It spreads through the courthouse. Like smoke, the press gets wind. Lawyers posture. Every defendant with a grudge files motions. It becomes chaos." Wolf's eyes were cold. "You seek to preserve appearances." "I seek to preserve function," Hella snapped, and then checked himself. "Mr. Wolf, I do not need a scandal. The city does not need it." Wolf studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "Your desire for silence is understandable. It is also selfish." Hella's jaw tightened. "Call it what you like." Wolf took a slow swallow of beer. "And what do you want me to do?" Hella leaned forward. "Find who is doing it, quietly, before Monday." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Before Monday, there is a major hearing Monday," Hella said. "A corruption case. High profile. If my chambers are compromised, everything becomes suspect." Wolf stared at him as if weighing the world against his own schedule. Then Wolf said, "Number." Hella froze. "Number. No," Wolf repeated. "I will not be recruited into your timetable and your fear." Hella's face flushed. He stood halfway, then sat again because his pride wrestled with his need. "Mr. Wolf," he said tightly, "I am not asking as a favor." Wolf's gaze was indifferent. "That is irrelevant." Hella's voice lowered. "I will pay." Wolf's eyes flicked, because money always earns at least a flick. "How much?" Wolf asked. Hella named a figure that would have bought a small car or a large argument. Wolf did not look impressed. "My fee is not a bribe." Hella's mouth tightened. "Then consider it an insurance premium." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Insurance against what?" Hella hesitated. That hesitation was the first real crack I had seen in him. Then he said, "Against a death." The word landed in Wolf's office like a dropped object. Fritz's footsteps moved somewhere in the hall. The house did not react, but the air did. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Hella swallowed. "This morning Daniel Mott told me he had found something. He would not say what. He only said, 'Judge, Someone is using your chambers like a safe. Wolf's voice was flat. A safe for what? Hella's jaw tightened. He did not say. He asked me to meet him after court in chambers alone. Wolf's gaze was steady. And you did not. I did, Hella admitted. He was nervous. He said there were documents being swapped, minutes altered, notes inserted. He said it was subtle, but deliberate. He said it could destroy me. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And you came here instead of addressing it then? Hella's face hardened because Daniel begged me not to tell anyone. He said if the wrong person knew he had noticed, he was finished. Wolf's expression remained cold. So you came to a detective you had not yet hired and told him your clerk feared for his life. I came because I don't know who to trust, Hella said, and the admission sounded like it pained him. In that building, trust is traded like favors. I refuse to trade it. Wolf stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, I will not accept your case. Hella's eyes widened. Mr. Wolf. Wolf lifted a hand. I will not accept your case, he repeated. Until you agree to one condition. Hella's breath caught. Name it. Wolf's voice was calm and heavy. No lies to me, not even polite ones, not omissions, not adjustments. If you come to me with a private matter and conceal what is relevant, you waste my time. I do not forgive that. Hella swallowed, agreed. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Say it. Hella's jaw clenched. Then he said, I will not lie to you. Wolf nodded once. Good, Archie, take the retainer. I took the trembling check Hella produced and tucked it in my desk drawer because I like to keep my future lunches within reach. Wolf looked at Hella. Now we will begin. You will take Archie to your chambers. He will observe. He will speak with your clerk. He will report to me. I will not enter a courthouse unless forced. Hella started to protest, then stopped. He had been in court too long to argue with a ruling. All right, he said, but Daniel is waiting. He asked me to meet him again after hours. He said he would show me what he found. Show you what he found. Convenient timing. Hella bristled. Are you implying? I imply nothing, Wolf said. I observe proceed, Archie. We left at once because one thing a judge's schedule does better than an orchid schedule is shorten patience. The cab ride downtown took us through winter streets where the city looked like steel and salt and hurried faces. Hella stared out the window with the rigid posture of a man resisting fear. I watched him and decided he was not lying about being frightened, which did not mean he was telling everything. The courthouse at night has its own smell, a mixture of floor wax, stale paper, and old ambition. Daytime crowds were gone. The echoes were louder. The security guard recognized Hella, nodded, and let us pass without questions. A judge does not need a pass. He needs a reputation. We rode up in an elevator that hummed like it resented the work. Hella led me down a corridor lined with doors and brass nameplates. His chambers were at the end where distance and authority can pretend to be the same thing. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dark except for one desk lamp that cast a tight circle of light. The rest of the chambers, the chairs, the shelves of books, the framed certificates, sat in shadow like obedient witnesses. Hella called softly, Daniel. No answer. He moved deeper into the room, and I followed, my hand automatically going toward my pocket, where a gun does not always solve problems, but does improve confidence. Hella's private office door was ajar. The desk lamp was on inside. Hella stepped through first. Daniel, I'm here. I stepped in behind him and saw the clerk. Daniel Mott lay on the rug beside the desk, one arm outstretched as if reaching for something he had dropped. He was young, maybe 30, with brown hair and a neat suit, now ruined by the angle of his body. His eyes were open. His face was frozen in surprise. A letter opener protruded from his chest. The letter opener was long, narrow, and polished, the kind of thing any courthouse desk might own. It was also planted with a kind of deliberate symbolism. If you want to kill a clerk and make it look like the institution did it, you choose the institution's own tool. Hella made a sound that was half gasp and half choke. He stepped forward, then stopped, as if the floor had become unsafe. "No," he whispered. I moved past him and crouched, keeping my eyes on the room. Because dead bodies don't move, but killers sometimes do. The clerk's skin was already cooling. There was no pulse. The letter opener's handle bore an engraved seal, the court seal. Hella's voice was tight with horror. "That belongs to the court." I looked up at him. "Judge, you just bought yourself the bonfire you wanted to prevent." His face went pale. "We cannot call the police." I stared at him for a beat, because sometimes men with titles say the stupidest things when their fear becomes physical. "You have a corpse in your chambers," I said. "If you don't call the police, you'll have 2 problems instead of 1. Hella's jaw tightened. "If the press finds out, the press will find out," I said. "The only question is whether you will look like you tried to hide a murder." He stared at the clerk as if willing him to stand up and apologize. Then he whispered, "Solve it clean. Solve it quiet." I heard Wolf's voice in my head, calm and contemptuous. "No lies to me." I stood and pulled my phone from my pocket. Hella's eyes snapped to mine. "What are you doing?" "Calling Inspector Kramer," I said, "and calling Wolf. Your condition was no lies. Here's mine. No suicides of judgment." Hella's face tightened. "Wolf will refuse now." I looked down at the dead clerk, the court's own letter opener protruding like an accusation. Then I looked back at Hella. "He won't," I said. "Not after this. And Judge, if you've been holding anything back, now is the time to stop. Because whoever did this didn't just kill your clerk. They staged it. They want the courthouse to burn." My phone rang once, twice, and then Nero Wolf's voice came on the line, heavy and calm. "Archie," I swallowed, keeping my eyes on the office door. "We have a body," I said, "in the judge's chambers, stabbed with a court letter opener, and the judge wants it quiet." Wolf was silent for a moment. Then he said, in a tone that made the hair at the back of my neck lift slightly, "Put the judge on the telephone." I handed it to Hella. Hella's voice was thin. "Mr. Wolf." Wolf's voice came through the receiver like a ruling. "Judge Hella, you have already failed my condition." Hella blinked. "I have not lied," Wolf replied. "You have not told me something. You will tell me now, or I will withdraw and leave you to your bonfire." Hella's eyes widened. His mouth opened. His gaze went past me to the dead clerk. And in that second, I saw it. Whatever he had come to hide was bigger than his fear of scandal. It was something that could make a judge beg for silence over a corpse. Hella's voice cracked. "All right." He swallowed hard, clutching the phone as if it were the last rung on a ladder. "I will tell you," he said, and I knew, from the way his eyes avoided the body, that the next sentence would change everything. Chapter 2. By the time Inspector Kramer arrived, the courthouse had already begun to smell like trouble, and trouble has its own odor. It is not blood. It is not fear. It is the scent of people deciding which truth to hide first. Kramer came in with 2 uniforms and a homicide technician, his face set in the familiar scowl that means he has been dragged out of warmth and into paperwork. He took one look at the body, one look at the letter opener, and then one look at me. "Goodwin," he said. "Why is it always you?" "Because I'm photogenic," I told him. "Also because your badge attracts corpses." He grunted and waved his men in. The technician crouched by the body, photographing, measuring, muttering. A uniform guided Judge Hella into the outer office with the careful tone used for a man who has influence and might soon lose it. Kramer's eyes moved around the room with the practiced impatience of a man who knows he will be listening to lies all night. "What do we have?" he demanded. "A dead clerk," I said, "in chambers, stabbed with the court's own letter opener, and a judge who wanted it quiet." Kramer's nostrils flared. Quiet died with him. He nodded toward the handle. The polished hilt bore the engraved court seal, a bit theatrical for anyone who truly wanted a quiet killing. "That's the court's," Kramer said. "Not subtle." "Not subtle" means either stupid or confident, I said. He leaned in without touching it. "Who found him?" "The judge and me," I said. We walked in, body was already cooling. The technician's voice drifted from the floor. Cooling. Yes. Rigger not set. We'll have a range. A range is not a time, Kramer snapped. It's what you get, the tech replied. Kramer looked at me again. Tell me what you were doing here. I told him how Hella had hired Wolf, and how Wolf had sent me to observe and talk to the clerk. I left out none of it, because Wolf's condition was no lies, and I had already decided that if anyone was going to get burnt in this bonfire, it would not be me for withholding kindling. Kramer listened, face unreadable, then nodded once. Fine, he said. You can stick around, but you stay out of my way. If you contaminate the scene, I'll pin you to the wall. You always know how to make a man feel welcome, I said. He ignored me and went into the outer office to begin with the judge. While Kramer worked his authority on Hella, I worked mine on the room. A dead body does not tell you much directly, but it can tell you everything indirectly. Who wanted it found, who wanted it staged, and who wanted time to be confused. The clerk's name, for starters, was already confused. The judge had called him Daniel Mott. His badge, clipped neatly to his lapel, said Daniel Mott, clerk, but when the uniforms turned out his pockets, they found a wallet that said Owen Pike on the driver's license. A neat picture of the same face, smiling like a man who believed paperwork was harmless. Alias or arrangement, either way, it meant his life had 2 columns, just like his deals. I found the first solid piece in his coat, draped carefully over the back of a chair, as if he had planned to work late and disliked wrinkles. In the inside pocket was a slim, cheap notebook, not a planner, not a calendar. The kind of thing you buy when you want your handwriting to look like nothing important. I took it to Kramer. He looked at it like it was a mosquito. What's that? Notebook, I said, in Pike's coat, might be relevant. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Bag it. Before you bag it, I said. Let me glance. 2 minutes. I'll wear gloves. If it's personal, you can enjoy it later. If it's business, Wolf needs to know. Kramer stared at me, irritated, then decided convenience was cheaper than arguing. 2 minutes, he said. And if you tear a page, I'll tear your ear. A tech handed me gloves. I put them on and opened the notebook. It was a ledger disguised as scratch work. Dates, case numbers, names, and 2 headings written in a tight scrawl that tried to look casual, fixes, favors. Under fixes were entries like G. Mincher, continuance moved. Peep Sloan, transcript corrected. Ra Vento, bail reduced. Docket swap. Under favors were notes like lunch owed, tickets delivered, payment pending, judge said no, judge not told. That last one made my eyes linger. Further in, it got uglier. There were initials tied to docket numbers with phrases like Lowe's exhibit, delay order, insert memo, make it vanish. Each line had a date and a name or set of initials. This was not a clerk doing clerical work. This was a clerk doing brokerage. I closed it and handed it back. Not a grocery list. Kramer took one look and his face hardened. Bag it now. I stepped into the corridor and called Wolf. Archie, he said. The clerk kept a side notebook, I told him. Fixes and favors tied to judge, Hella's docket, case numbers, names. What was adjusted, it's rot with handwriting. Wolf was silent a beat. When he spoke, his voice had cooled. So the clerk was a broker, Wolf said, and likely the judge was either complicit or convenient. Continue. Who else knew of this notebook? Unknown, I said. But it smells like motive. Someone wanted that notebook stopped or seized. Or displayed, Wolf said. Displayed? Yes, Wolf replied. A bonfire needs kindling arranged. Do not assume the murderer wishes the truth hidden. Sometimes the murderer wishes it revealed, but aimed. That was Wolf. He never forgets that people don't just lie to hide, they lie to steer. I hung up and watched Kramer run his interviews. The first witness I paid attention to was the bailiff assigned to Hella's floor. A thick-necked man named Reardon, who looked like he had spent his life leaning against walls and judging other people's shoes. Reardon sat in the corridor, cap in hand, Sweating, Kramer said. You were on duty tonight. Yes. You saw Owen Pike. Reardon blinked. That's the clerk. That's the body, Kramer snapped. When? Reardon hesitated. After 8. That fit the tech's early range, but then Reardon added the line that made Kramer's eyebrows jump. I saw him after 9 too, Reardon said. Kramer leaned forward. After 9. Yes, Reardon insisted. He came out, walked down to the copy room, then came back. He nodded at me, alive. Kramer's face went flat. What time? Reardon frowned, as if time were an annoyance. 9:10, 9:15. The medical estimate was still developing, but if Pike was dead closer to 8:30, then Reardon had just rewritten the clock. Either he was wrong, or he was lying, or he had seen someone else and called him Pike. I leaned in. Bailiff, you sure it was Pike? Reardon glared. I see the clerk every day, Kramer snapped. Why didn't you report anything? Because nothing seemed wrong, Reardon said. Kramer waved him away with disgust and called the next witness. Reardon's testimony lodged in my head like a splinter. The guilty always try to rewrite clocks. Sometimes they do it by bribing witnesses. Sometimes they do it by planting another body. Sometimes they do it by making the building itself lie. That last possibility walked in a few minutes later on a sheet of paper. Courthouses worship logs. Every door, every pass, every movement is recorded by something. The security desk produced an electronic access report for Heller's chambers, a printout of badge entries and sensor triggers. A young security officer handed it to Kramer with the pale face of a man realizing his job had become important. Kramer scanned it and cursed under his breath. Then he shoved it toward me. Look at that, he said. I looked. Between 8 and 10, the window when Pike was apparently killed, the log showed something impossible. No door opening recorded. No badge entry. No sensor alert. Nothing. The chamber door was, on paper, never opened during the murder window. Kramer stared at the sheet like it had insulted him. Door never opened. You got a dead man inside, and a door that never opened, I said. So either the killer floated through the wall, or someone messed with the log. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Or the door was already open. It wasn't, I said. The judge unlocked it when we arrived. Kramer's mouth tightened. Then someone either bypassed the system or altered it. I called Wolf again. The security log shows the chamber door was never opened during the window. I told him. No recorded entries. Also a bailiff swears he saw Pike alive at 9:15. Wolf's voice came back, dry and certain, a staged timeline. Because the guilty rewrite clocks, I said. Yes, Wolf replied. The question is which clock? The bodies, the buildings, or the witnesses? Find who benefits from Pike being alive at 9:15 or dead at 8:45. Time is being used. I hung up and looked around the corridor with new suspicion. A courthouse is full of internal arteries, little passages meant for staff, for maintenance, for judges who want to avoid defendants. If the door log was clean, someone had used an unlogged route, or had cleaned the log. I found the security officer, again. Where are the sensor panels? I asked him. The ones that feed the door log. He blinked. What? The panel, I said. The hardware that reports to your system. He pointed down a side hall. Facilities room. Locked. Everything in this place is locked, I said. That's how it feels safe. A uniform accompanied me, and we got the key. The facilities room was cramped, filled with wiring panels and labeled switches, dust and heat, the smell of unseen machinery. I found the label for Heller Chambers and stared at it. The indicator showed normal. No alarms, no faults, too normal. Then I saw it, a fresh scratch near the screws on the panel cover, not old wear. Fresh. I called Kramer. He came, saw the scratch, and swore hard enough to offend the wiring. Get a tech on this, he barked. While he was barking, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. You cannot solve it clean if the judge is dirty. No signature, no name. Just a sentence that touched the exact sore spot. I put the phone away. Anonymous tips are like cheap whiskey. They might warm you, they might poison you, and they always burn. I went back to the judge. Heller sat alone in a small office, face grey, eyes fixed on nothing. He looked less like a man who could sentence others, and more like a man being sentenced by his own history. I sat opposite him. "Judge," I said. He blinked. "Goodwin, you promised Wolf no lies," I said. "That includes polite omissions. Owen Pike had a ledger of fixes and favors tied to your docket. You knew something." His jaw tightened. "I knew he did favors." "Favors," I repeated. "Adjustments that help one side and hurt the other." Heller's face stiffened. "I never ordered him." "That's not the question," I said. "Did you know he was doing it?" He swallowed. "I suspected." "Suspected and allowed," I said. Heller's voice went tight. "In that building, if you refuse help, you drown." "So you let your clerk broker your schedule," I said. "And now he's dead with the court seal in his chest and a door log that says no one entered." Heller's breath caught. He stared at the carpet and then said quietly, "It isn't about money." "What is it about?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Evidence." The word chilled me. "Evidence that can overturn convictions," Heller said. "Evidence that can ruin careers. Owen told me he found something hidden in my chambers. Something someone thought was safe." "A safe," I murmured. He nodded. He said the wrong person hid it there because no one suspects a judge's office. He said if that evidence surfaced, the courthouse would burn. "And he planned to show you tonight," I said. Heller's eyes closed briefly. "Yes." "Who hid it?" I asked. Heller's eyes opened, and they looked helpless. "I don't know. That was either a lie or a tragedy." I stood. "If you suddenly remember, call me, because someone is arranging a bonfire and you're standing on the wood." I returned to chambers, and my eyes went back over the room as if I could see through walls. The desk, the shelves, the framed certificates, the decanter set, the rug, the file cabinets. Then I saw something that tightened my stomach. A framed photograph of the courthouse hung behind the judge's desk. It was slightly crooked, not bumped but replaced in a hurry. The paint behind it looked cleaner, like something had been pressed there repeatedly. Beneath the frame's lower edge, a thin seam ran in the wall, paneling, not a crack, a join, a hiding place. The homicide tech saw me looking and barked. "Don't. I'm not touching," I said. "I'm appreciating." He frowned. I stepped back and took out my phone, because I didn't need hands to deliver news. The unknown number buzzed again. "Look behind the picture, too late." I stared at the seam. If Pike had found what was hidden there, someone had killed him to stop him from revealing it. And if the message was right, the evidence might already be gone, which meant the staged timeline, the impossible door log, and the bailiff's rewritten clock were not just to cover a murder. They were to cover a theft, the theft of whatever had been hidden behind that picture. And that was the kindling that would burn the courthouse down. Chapter 3. A judge's chambers is supposed to look like authority lives there. Clean lines, clean desk, clean conscience. I had already learned that only the first one was reliable. Kramer's people kept Owen Pike's body where it lay, like a punctuation mark that made every sentence in the room look guilty. The homicide techs were methodical, snapping pictures, dusting surfaces, swabbing edges, collecting fibers that might or might not belong to anyone who mattered. A uniform stood at the door with the bored posture of a man guarding trouble until it grows into overtime. I stayed out of their way because I enjoy breathing, and because Kramer's threat about pinning me to the wall sounded less like humor and more like exercise. But I stayed close enough to use my eyes, which Wolf had specifically ordered to remain active while my hands behaved. The judge's desk was immaculate. Not tidy, immaculate. The blotter sat centered. A pen lay parallel to the edge. A stack of files looked squared and obedient. The desk lamp threw a tight circle of light on nothing that deserved it. If you want a room to look innocent, You make the most visible surface look untouched. Which is why I looked at the trash bin. It sat beside the desk, half hidden behind the knee-hole. The kind of thing that gathers the truth a person does not want on display. The bin itself was a standard metal cylinder, but it held the smell of fresh paper, coffee, and panic. The papers inside were torn in a way that did not look casual, not ripped once and tossed, torn again and again as if the person tearing them had wanted the pieces too small to matter. A homicide tech was working on the desk. I caught his eye and nodded toward the bin. "Bag that yet?" I asked. He frowned. "We'll get to it." "Do it soon," I said. "A tidy desk is a liar's stage. The trash is where the plot goes." He looked like he wanted to argue, but a murder scene is not the place to defend a trash bin's dignity. He called another tech over, and they started bagging the contents with the slow reverence usually reserved for evidence that will later become a headline. While they did that, I drifted to the wall behind the desk, where the framed courthouse photograph hung slightly crooked. I did not touch it. I did not even breathe too hard near it. I simply looked at the seam beneath the frame, the thin join in the paneling that did not match the rest of the wall. If you spend enough time around Wolf, you learn to respect seams. A seam is a confession that has not yet been spoken aloud. The frame had been moved recently. The wall behind it was cleaner, the faint outline of repeated removal. Someone had accessed whatever was behind it, and not with leisurely confidence. With urgency, Kramer stepped into the private office then, his coat open, his face tired, his eyes scanning as if looking for the quickest way to end the night. I said, "Inspector, that picture is crooked." Kramer glared. "The clerk is dead." "I noticed," I said, "and someone may have stolen what he found. That seam suggests a hidden compartment behind the frame." Kramer's eyes narrowed, and for a moment annoyance had to share space with interest. "Don't touch it," he snapped. "I haven't," I said, "but you might want to." Kramer grunted, jerked a thumb at a tech, and said, "Photograph it, then we'll pull it." The tech nodded and began setting up. That was when I found the torn sheet. It was on the floor near the desk chair, half tucked under the edge of the rug, like a scrap kicked aside in haste. A clean room does not usually let scraps escape, which meant this one had been missed because it was not expected to exist. I did not pick it up. I leaned down, read it, and felt my stomach tighten. It was a sheet torn from a docket calendar, the kind kept clipped to a board for quick reference. The top had the week printed in block letters. Most entries were routine, handwritten shorthand for hearings, motions, arraignments. But in the lower right corner, circled hard enough to bruise the paper, was one word written in thick ink, sealed. No case number next to it, just the word and a time, 8:30. The time mattered. 8:30 sat inside the murder window, like a nail driven into it. I straightened and caught the tech's attention. "That's scrap," I said. "Bag it." He crouched, saw it, and nodded. Within seconds it was photographed and sealed in a clear evidence sleeve. The irony of sealing an item marked sealed was not lost on me, but my sense of humor had already been rented out for the night. I called Wolf from the corridor outside, because I did not want Kramer to hear his voice and decide to arrest both of us for entertainment. Wolf answered at once. "Archie." "In chambers," I said. "The desk is spotless, the trash bin is full of shredded paper, and there's a torn docket calendar sheet on the floor, marked sealed. Time 8:30. Wolf was silent for a beat. 8:30, he said. "Yes, a marker," Wolf replied. "Not necessarily the time of death, the time of an event. Continue." "The wall behind the desk has a seam behind the courthouse photo," I added. "Looks like a hidden compartment. Kramer is about to pull the frame." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "Good. Note who becomes interested when it is opened. Some people cannot hide their appetite." I hung up and went back into the corridor where Kramer was now interviewing courthouse staff, with the vigor of a man trying to make time stop being slippery. The court reporter was named Ellen Quaid. She was in her late 30s, hair pinned back too tight, a face that looked as if she had learned to keep expression neutral in rooms full of drama. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. They kept shifting toward the judge's chamber's door, as if expecting it to open and accuse her. Kramer asked, "You worked with Pike?" "Yes," she said. "Know him well." "Well enough," Quaid replied. "Did he mention anything? Threats? Fear?" Quaid hesitated. Kramer leaned forward. "That's a fast." "No." Her face tightened. "He mentioned nothing to me." Kramer grunted. "You sure?" Quaid swallowed. He was acting nervous. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Since when?" Quaid hesitated again, then said, "Since the holiday party." That landed like a dropped plate. Holiday party meant alcohol, gossip, loose talk, and the kind of mistakes people regret in January. Kramer asked, "Why?" Quaid's mouth tightened. She started to answer, then stopped as if an invisible hand had squeezed her throat. "I don't know," she said quickly. That was too fast, too neat. Kramer's eyes hardened. "You just said he was nervous since the party. Now you don't know why." Quaid's eyes flicked toward the corridor and the distant elevator, toward anything but Kramer's face. "People get nervous. It's a courthouse." Kramer's voice rose slightly. "You're holding back." Quaid's lips pressed together. I watched her and saw it. Her fear was not the fear of a murderer in a hallway. It was the fear of consequences. The fear of what speaking might expose. Wolf would call that fear useful. Kramer glared at her. "Quaid, talk." Quaid's voice turned small and sharp. "Inspector, if you keep pushing, you're going to burn the whole building down." Kramer stared. "We already have a body. The building's already burning." Quaid swallowed hard. "Not like that." Kramer's gaze narrowed. "What do you mean, not like that?" Quaid's eyes shimmered for a second, then hardened into refusal. "I want a lawyer." Kramer cursed under his breath and waved her away, because when someone invokes a lawyer, the interview becomes paperwork instead of truth. I stepped aside as she hurried down the corridor. She looked straight ahead, shoulders tight, walking like a woman, trying not to be seen. I followed her, not close. Close is rude. I followed at a distance that allowed her to believe she was alone until she made the mistake of turning her head. She went into the court reporter's workroom, a narrow space with desks, tape recorders, and stacks of transcripts that smelled like stale ambition. She sat at her desk, opened a drawer, and stared at whatever was inside, as if deciding whether it could save her. I stayed in the doorway, a casual shadow. Quaid's head snapped up. "Mr. Goodwin." "Miss Quaid," I said. "You asked for a lawyer." "Good. Lawyers are excellent at slowing down fires." Her jaw tightened. "I don't have anything to say," I nodded. "You do. You just don't want to be the person who says it first." Quaid's eyes flashed. "You don't understand what this is." "I understand a clerk died," I said. "I understand a judge hired Wolf because he wanted it quiet. I understand someone has been trading fixes and favors on the docket like poker chips. And I understand you're afraid, not of murder, but of what murder might expose." Quaid's face went pale. She looked away, then back. "You're trying to trap me," she whispered. "I'm trying to keep you alive," I said, and I meant it. "Pike was nervous since the holiday party. That's your detail, it matters." "Why?" Quaid's mouth tightened. He said he'd made a mistake." "What mistake?" I asked. She shook her head. "I can't. Try," I said. Quaid swallowed. "He said he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see, a sealed matter, a sealed file. He said it was in Judge Heller's chambers and it shouldn't be." My pulse tightened. "Did he name it?" Quaid's voice dropped. "He didn't give a case number. He said if he wrote it down he would die. Then he laughed like he knew it wasn't a joke." I kept my voice steady. "Who else was at the holiday party?" Quaid's eyes flicked again, and this time the flick was toward a name she did not want to say. "Everyone," she said too quickly. "Not helpful," I replied. "Who had reason to care about a sealed matter?" Quaid's lips pressed together. Then she said, "There's a man, a bailiff Reardon. He drinks too much. He talks too much." "That's not a rarity in this building," I said. Quade's voice trembled. "He talked about a sealed hearing coming up. He said it was going to fix things. He said the judge would do what he was told." My mouth went dry. He said the judge would do what he was told. Quade nodded once, eyes bright with fear. Then Pike went pale. He left early, and after that, he was nervous all week. I stared at her. "And you didn't report it?" Quade's laugh was bitter. "Report it to whom? The judge? The police? The same machine?" I nodded slowly. "You're afraid of the machine," Quade whispered. "I'm afraid of the match." I left her with that because pushing further would only make her retreat into silence, and I needed her to stay reachable. I returned to the corridor and called Wolf. Wolf answered. "Archie." "The court reporter Ellen Quade," I said, "says Pike was nervous since the holiday party. He told her he saw a sealed matter in the judge's chambers that shouldn't be there. She also says Bailiff Reardon bragged about a sealed hearing that would fix things, and that the judge would do what he was told." Wolf was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Her fear is not of murder." "No," I said. "It's of what murder might expose." "Yes," Wolf replied. "That is usually the more accurate fear." I heard him shift in his chair, which means his mind had shifted too. "Archie," Wolf said, "I am sending Saul Panzer to quietly map Pike's last week. Every lunch, every call, every meeting. Pike was a broker. Brokers meet buyers." "Good," I said. "Kramer will pull the frame behind the desk soon. We might find the safe." Wolf's voice stayed calm, "Or we will find it empty. Either way, the act of looking will cause reactions. Watch the reactions." "Who?" I asked. "Anyone who speaks like they already know the verdict," Wolf said. "Innocent people speculate. Guilty people assert." I hung up and went back into the judge's chambers just in time to see the frame come off the wall. Kramer stood with a tech. They lifted the photograph carefully, revealing a shallow recess in the paneling behind it. Not a safe exactly. A hidden compartment. The kind made by a carpenter with a wink. It was empty, not dusty empty. Recently emptied. The recess was clean enough to show the faint marks of a thin folder or envelope pressed against the wood. Kramer swore. "Damn it." I watched his face, the tech's face, and the faces in the doorway, including a junior clerk and a nervous deputy. The junior clerk gasped. A real reaction. The deputy looked confused, but Bailiff Reardon, who had wandered closer, did not look surprised at all. He looked annoyed. Annoyance is not what you show when you discover a hidden compartment in a judge's office. Surprise is, fear is, even satisfaction is. Annoyance suggests you already knew it was there, and you are irritated. It has become visible. I met his eyes. He shifted his gaze away too quickly, then forced it back with a look that tried to be bored. I smiled at him because I am rude that way. Reardon's jaw tightened, and I heard Wolf's instruction in my head again. Watch who speaks like they already know the verdict. Reardon had not spoken. He had done something more revealing. He had already known where the firewood was stacked. Chapter 4 Saul Panzer called at 10 in the morning, which meant he had either found something useful or found something dangerous. With Saul, the two often come as a set. I was at my desk in the office, pretending to organize papers while actually doing what I always do when Wolf is thinking, which is wait for the moment when he needs legs. Wolf sat behind his desk with a beer at hand and a look on his face that suggested the city had disappointed him again by continuing to exist. The phone rang. I answered. "Goodwin," Saul said. His voice was calm, which is Saul's version of excitement. "You have news," I said. "I have movement," Saul replied. "Owen Pike met late at night 3 times last week with a private lawyer named Dean Lark." I glanced at Wolf. Wolf's eyes had sharpened slightly. "Dean Lark," I repeated. "Not Evan Dean." "Dean," Saul said. "Known for making charges vanish. He's had clients walk out of court smiling when they should have been measured for stripes." Wolf spoke without taking the receiver from me. "Where did Pike meet him?" Saul replied. A small office in Midtown, one of those buildings that smell like polished stone and secrets. Pike used the side entrance. He did not want a receptionist's memory, I said. Did anyone see him? Building security noted a clerk. Type coming in after hours, Saul said. No name, but the timing matches. Also Pike paid in cash. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Cash indicates fear or guilt. Saul said, or both. I can get more, but it will take time, Wolf said. Continue. Saul paused, then added, Pike was also seen in the courthouse garage late 2 nights. That detail came from a maintenance man, not from a log. Logs can be massaged. Thank you, Wolf said. Stay with it. I hung up and leaned back, thinking about Dean Lark. A lawyer who makes charges vanish does not do it by magic. He does it by leverage, favors, pressure, and sometimes by paper that should remain sealed. Wolf regarded me. Archie, you will visit Pike's apartment. I blinked. Now, yes, Wolf said. A man who keeps a ledger of fixes and favors does not store all of it in a courthouse. He stores enough elsewhere to protect himself, or to sell later. Or to burn, I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Exactly. Go. Pike lived in a small walk, up in Queens, a building that had once been respectable and now settled for being standing. The hallway smelled of fried onions, old paint, and the faint despair of rent. I knocked. There was no answer. I showed my card to the superintendent, said words like homicide investigation without actually lying, and got permission to go in. His apartment was modest, neat in the way a man's place is neat, when he wants it to look as if nothing important happens there. A couch, a small table, 2 shelves of law books that looked more like props than possessions, and a kitchenette that was too clean. Too clean is always suspicious, because real life leaves crumbs. I walked through slowly, letting my eyes do their work. A dresser drawer contained socks, shirts, and a cheap watch. Nothing interesting. But the kitchen sink drew me like the trash bin had drawn me in Chambers. There was a faint smell of smoke, not cigarette smoke, paper smoke. In the sink, caught in the drain strainer, were small black flakes, the brittle remains of burned paper. Someone had tried to burn something and then wash the evidence away. The sink had a faint ring of ash near the drain. He put on gloves and lifted one flake carefully. It crumbled. I found a slightly larger fragment stuck to the side of the strainer, damp but readable in spots. A line of handwriting, not enough to reconstruct a sentence, but enough to recognize the hand. Tight, neat, the same kind of handwriting I had seen in Pike's notebook. A burned ledger page in the sink. I glanced around for an ashtray or a fireplace. There was neither. That meant the burn had been done in haste, probably over the sink, with a lighter or a match. The kind of thing you do when you are frightened and do not have time to be clever. On the counter, near the microwave, was a small bowl holding keys, coins, and a plastic card. I lifted the card. It was Owen Pike's courthouse garage keycard, not the type issued to everyone. This one had a number and a barcode and a faint court seal. The back was scuffed from use. Pike had a private route into the building. Private routes are not given away casually. They are earned or traded. The box contained old photographs, a watch, and a folded envelope with a name written in careful letters. Dean Lark. Inside the envelope was nothing but a torn business card, missing half the phone number. That felt like a warning to himself, a reminder without a full commitment. I took pictures and left the box where it was. Kramer would want it, and Kramer would get it. But Wolf would want it first. And Wolf had earned my loyalty by paying my salary and keeping my skull intact. As I was leaving, a neighbor stepped into the hall, a woman in her 60s with a cat on her hip and an expression that suggested she ran the building by glare alone. "You're with the police," she said. "I'm with the truth," I replied. "The police rent it by the hour." She sniffed. That boy was trouble. "Define trouble," I said. She nodded toward Pike's door. "He wasn't loud. He wasn't messy. But he was nervous, always looking behind him, like somebody had his spine in a vise. "Did you see anyone with him?" I asked. She adjusted the cat. "A woman came by the night before," they argued. My pulse tightened. "What woman?" The neighbor frowned. "I don't know. Not from this building. She had a gray coat. Nice coat. Not like ours." "Gray coat," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Gray coat. Dark hair." She was angry. He was scared. He kept saying, "Not here, not here." She kept saying, "You promised." "That's a useful phrase," I said. "Did she come inside?" "No," the neighbor said. They argued in the hall. Then she left. He stood there a while, like he wanted to vomit. "Did you hear anything else?" I asked. She thought. He said, "I can't fix it," she said. "Then I'll fix you." The cat purred as if pleased by violence. I thanked her and left, because my imagination had enough fuel without adding more hallway drama. Back at the brownstone, Wolf was in the office with Fritz's lunch scent drifting down the hall, and the orchids having been attended on schedule. Wolf's mood had improved slightly, which meant something in his mind had clicked into place. I told him what I found. "A burned ledger page in the sink," I said, "and a courthouse garage keycard. Also, a neighbor saw Pike argue with a woman in a gray coat the night before he died." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Gray coat?" "Yes," I said, "and the woman said you promised." Wolf sipped beer. "Gray coats are common, Archie." "I know," I said. "Half the city wears gray in winter. The coat isn't the clue. The reason is." Wolf nodded once, approving without admitting it. "Precisely, we hunt the reason. A woman with a gray coat and a grievance. What reason would she have to confront a clerk in a hallway?" I leaned back. "Because he could fix something." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Or because he refused to." I placed the garage keycard on Wolf's desk. He looked at it as if it were an insect that might bite. "This," Wolf said, "is more interesting than the coat. It's a private route," I said. "And Saul says Pike was seen in the courthouse garage late 2 nights. Wolf nodded. "A hidden compartment behind the judge's photograph was emptied recently. A clerk with a garage route was meeting a lawyer who makes charges vanish. A court reporter mentions a sealed matter, and a bailiff rewrites time." He looked at me. "Archie, the courthouse is not a bonfire yet. It is a stove. Someone is controlling the heat." "So who is Dean Lark to this?" I asked. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "He is either the man who removes evidence, or the man who profits from its removal." "And the woman in the gray coat," I said. Wolf's voice stayed calm. "She is either a client who believes promises, or an accomplice who enforces them." I frowned. "How do we find her?" Wolf's eyes lifted to mine. "We find the reason. The reason will lead to her. Ask yourself, Archie, what could be hidden in a judge's chambers that requires a private lawyer, a bribbable clerk, and a staged timeline?" I thought of sealed cases, overturned convictions, careers ruined. Then I thought of something worse, evidence that implicates the wrong people. I said, "Blackmail." Wolf nodded. "Yes, and blackmail is always about power, not money. Money is merely the receipt." He leaned back. "We will see Dean Lark." I blinked. "You will." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "I will send you." "Of course," I said. "The orchids have a schedule and I have legs." Wolf ignored that. "Before you go," Wolf said, "we must decide the shape of the secret." I raised an eyebrow. "We don't have it. It's been removed from the compartment." Wolf's gaze was steady. "But we have the shadow it cast. The compartment was emptied, but the man who emptied it could not remove the fact that Pike knew. That is why Pike is dead. Therefore, whatever was removed is valuable enough to kill for, but dangerous enough that the killer still fears exposure." I nodded slowly. Wolf said, "That narrows it. It is not a mere bribe list. It is not a petty scandal. It is something that would burn more than one man." "And the judge," I said. Is he dirty? Wolf's mouth tightened. We will know when he stops being afraid of scandal and starts being afraid of truth. I thought of the anonymous message. You cannot solve it clean if the judge is dirty. Then I thought of the neighbor's line. You promised, promises, favors, fixes, seals, and a lawyer who makes charges vanish. New York loves to pretend its institutions are marble. Most of them are paper. Wolf's voice pulled me back. Archie, yes. Take Saul's information, Wolf said. Take the keycard, go to Dean Lark. Do not accuse, observe. Listen. Watch who speaks like he already knows the verdict. I stood, pocketed the keycard, and reached for my coat. As I headed to the door, Wolf added, calmly, and Archie. Yes, grey coats are common, Wolf said, but a woman who threatens, I'll fix you, is not, find her. I left the brownstone with New York winter biting at my face, and the unpleasant certainty that somewhere between the courthouse garage and a midtown lawyer's office, the real evidence was moving. And once evidence starts moving, it either finds safety or it finds a grave. Chapter 5. When you work for Nero Wolfe, you learn that secrets do not stay politely in the boxes people build for them. They leak, they seep. They climb out of drawers and crawl into daylight, and the only question is whether they do it before or after someone gets killed. The sealed case showed up at 11:45 that morning, and it arrived the way all good trouble arrives in Wolfe's office, carried by a man who should have known better than to bring it. Judge Grant Heller came again, without climbing the stairs like a man who owned them this time. He climbed like a man counting each step and deciding whether to turn back. His overcoat was buttoned wrong, his tie slightly off-center, and his eyes had that strained brightness you see in people who have spent the night arguing with themselves and lost. I let him in and told Fritz we would not be needing lunch at any scheduled hour, which made Fritz give me a look that suggested he would forgive homicide before he forgave disorder. Heller followed me into the office and stopped short when he saw Wolfe. Wolfe was already seated, beer at hand, face composed and unimpressed. He had done his orchid hours on time, which means he was in the best mood he ever permits himself, a mood that looks like contempt tempered by patience. Heller stood, hands clenched. Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe nodded. Judge. Heller's jaw tightened. Your man has been in my chambers. He's been in Pike's apartment. I've had Kramer in my building. You promised discretion. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. I promised competence. Discretion is a luxury you forfeited when a corpse was placed in your office. Heller flinched at the word corpse, as if it made everything too real. Wolfe continued, sit. Heller sat in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk. He looked at the chair as if it might contain germs. Wolfe studied him for a moment, then said, You have failed my condition already. Twice. You may salvage a portion of my interest if you now tell the whole truth. Heller swallowed. I have told you what I know. Wolfe's eyes were cold. Number, you have told me what you wish to be seen knowing. That is not the same. I sat at my desk with my notebook open, because when a judge decides to confess, it is wise to have paper ready, Wolfe said. Archie has found that Owen Pike kept a ledger of fixes and favors tied to your docket. He met with Dean Lark, a private lawyer of some reputation. There was a hidden compartment behind a photograph in your office, recently emptied. A court reporter mentions a sealed matter. Now you will explain. Heller's mouth tightened. The sealed matter is a case. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. Most matters in court are cases. Heller's voice dropped. A construction fraud trial, city contract, public money, private pockets. I leaned forward slightly. Name. Heller hesitated, then said, People v. Holden Construction. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. And why sealed? Heller exhaled. Because it touches a city contract that is still active. Because it touches donors. Because it touches politics. The case was sealed at a critical stage to protect an ongoing procurement investigation. Wolfe made a small sound of disgust. Sealed to protect reputations. Heller's face tightened. Sealed to keep the city from imploding. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. Those are the same thing in different costumes. Continue. Heller swallowed. The contract is tied to a donor. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Name. Hella's voice came out strained. Conrad Bexley. The name did not mean anything to me yet, but it produced a subtle change in Wolf's face, a slight narrowing, a flicker of recognition. Wolf reads the social map the way other men read menus. Yes, Wolf said softly. Conrad Bexley, a benefactor with large checks and small scruples. Hella's shoulders slumped slightly, as if admitting the name made the problem heavier. I said, "So Pike's ledger connects to Bexley." Hella's jaw tightened, indirectly. Wolf's tone was flat. "Judge, you are hedging. That is a polite lie." Hella stiffened. Then he spoke, faster, as if finally surrendering momentum. "Owen Pike discovered tampering in the evidence chain," Hella said. "In the sealed case, a piece of evidence was moved, another item substituted, the record of custody altered." Wolf leaned back slightly. "By whom?" Hella's eyes flicked away. "I don't know." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You know more than that." Hella clenched his hands. "I know it happened in my chambers. That is the nightmare." The office went quiet. Even Fritz's faint movements in the hallway seemed to pause, as if the house itself disliked hearing its own address attached to corruption. Wolf's voice was calm. "Explain how it came to happen in your chambers." Hella's throat worked, Pike told me. He told me he had noticed irregularities in the chain documents, and then he found the compartment behind the photograph. He said it had been accessed recently. He said someone was using my chambers as a safe. He said he found a sealed packet inside. Wolf's eyes were cold, and he opened it. Hella nodded once, reluctantly. "He opened it," I said. "What was in it?" Hella's eyes tightened. A copy of an evidence transmittal form with altered entries, and a photograph of a witness statement page with a signature that did not match the witness's signature on file. Pike said it was proof someone had tampered with the evidence chain. Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Proof that could overturn convictions." "Yes," Hella said, "and proof that could implicate people who want to remain unimplicated." Wolf's tone remained flat. "Conrad Bexley," Hella flinched. "I do not know if Bexley is directly involved, but his company is tied to the contract. His name is attached to the donor list for my court's charity fund. His friends are attached to everything." Wolf took a slow swallow of beer, and Pike used this discovery to threaten you. Hella's face reddened. "He did not threaten me at first. He came frightened. He said he found something dangerous and he wanted guidance. I told him to give it to Internal Affairs." Wolf's eyes narrowed, and he refused. Hella's jaw tightened. "He said, if he gave it to Internal Affairs, he would die. He said, Internal Affairs would leak it to the wrong person. He said, 'Judge, you have enemies in your own building.'" Wolf's voice was cool. "And then he threatened you." Hella's shoulders sagged. "Yes," he said, "he would go public." "The word public came out like poison," he said. Hella continued, "That if I did not help him, he would take his ledger, his notebook, to the press. He said he had names, case numbers, favors. He said he could burn the courthouse down and he would do it if he had to, because he was tired of being the one who carried everyone's filth." Wolf watched him. "So you hired me?" Hella nodded, eyes bright. "I wanted you to retrieve Pike's notebook before it became a scandal grenade." Wolf's mouth tightened. "Not to prevent murder, to prevent embarrassment." Hella's voice rose, sharp with shame, "to prevent chaos. If that ledger went public, every case touched by Pike's fixes would be attacked. Convictions overturned, innocent people freed with guilty ones. The court would lose credibility overnight. It would become a bonfire." Wolf's gaze was cold. "You are a judge. You should prefer truth to credibility," Hella snapped. "Truth without structure is anarchy." Wolf did not flinch. Structure built on rot collapses anyway. I watched Hella's face and realized he was not a simple villain. He was a man who had convinced himself that holding the line mattered more than admitting the line was crooked. That kind of man is dangerous because he can justify anything as duty, Wolf said. "Where is Pike's notebook now?" Hella's eyes widened slightly. It was in his coat pocket in chambers. It is missing, I said. Heller stared at me. Missing, yes, I said. Kramer has the small notebook with fixes and favors, but the one Pike threatened you with is not accounted for. Either he had more than one, or someone took it. Heller's face went pale again. Then Pike is dead, and the notebook is gone. Wolf nodded once. Meaning someone murdered Paper as much as a man. The line landed hard. Heller sat back as if struck. Wolf continued. Now consider what follows. If Pike had a ledger of fixes and favors, and he discovered tampering in a sealed construction fraud case tied to Conrad Bexley, then the notebook is leverage. Whoever took it now holds leverage over you, over the court, over the city, and whoever killed Pike did it to control the narrative, not to erase it. Heller's voice shook. I did not kill him. Wolf looked at him as if the denial were irrelevant. I did not accuse you. I merely observe that your fear makes you pliable. Heller's jaw tightened. I came to you for help. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You came to me for silence. Now you will accept help, which includes noise. I said, Judge, when Pike threatened to go public, did he name anyone? Heller hesitated. He named a lawyer. Wolf's gaze sharpened. Dean Lark. Heller nodded. Yes, Pike said he had met Lark. He said Lark could make the ledger disappear. Pike said he might sell it instead, to protect himself. Wolf's voice was calm. Or to enrich himself. Heller's face tightened. Perhaps. I thought of Saul's report, the late-night meetings with Lark, the cash payments, and the woman in the grey coat in Pike's hallway, saying you promised. Wolf said, Judge, why did Pike fear internal affairs? Heller swallowed. Because Pike said the people behind this were not just crooked clerks. He said they were connected to the courthouse charity fund. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Which Conrad Bexley supports. Heller nodded, eyes miserable. Yes. Wolf leaned back, the chair creaking, and for a moment he looked not angry but thoughtful, which is more dangerous. Very well, Wolf said. We now have the shape, a sealed case, a donor, an evidence chain tampered with, a clerk who kept a ledger of fixes and favors, a judge who wanted the ledger contained, a lawyer who makes things vanish, a hidden compartment emptied, a bailiff rewriting time, and a woman in a grey coat demanding a promise. He looked at me. Archie. Yes, you will go to Dean Lark, Wolf said. You will not accuse. You will inquire, you will see whether he speaks like he already knows the verdict. I nodded. Wolf's gaze returned to Heller. And you, Judge, will do something difficult. Heller stiffened. What? Wolf's voice was flat. You will tell Inspector Kramer the truth. Fully, not because you enjoy it, but because your attempt to keep this quiet has already failed. The notebook is missing. That means it is in someone else's hands. Your silence will not protect you. It will merely make you easier to manipulate. Heller's face tightened. Kramer will destroy me, Wolf regarded him. Perhaps. But you will be destroyed anyway if you remain useful to blackmail, at least choose the form. Heller sat in silence for a long moment. Then he whispered, You don't understand the politics. Wolf's voice was calm and contemptuous. I understand politics perfectly. Politics is where men hide the price of their decisions. Heller rose slowly, as if every joint objected. All right, he said, and the surrender sounded like grief. He turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back. Mr. Wolf, Heller said, Pike told me one more thing. He said if he died, it would not be because of the ledger, it would be because of the sealed packet. He said that packet was the real match. Wolf's eyes narrowed, and the packet is gone. Yes, Heller whispered, gone. Heller left. For a moment the office was quiet. The kind of quiet that belongs in a house where orchids bloom on schedule and a chef prepares food with confidence. Then Wolf spoke. The notebook is missing, he said. Therefore the murderer's primary act was theft, and the murder was an accompaniment. I nodded. Summon and murdered Paper, as much as a man. Wolf looked at me, eyes steady. Yes, and Paper Archie can burn a city faster than gasoline. I stood and reached for my coat. Wolf added, "Be careful with Dean Lark." "I'm always careful," I said. Wolf's mouth tightened. "That is one of your more optimistic statements." I left the brownstone with Wolf's words in my head and the uncomfortable knowledge that somewhere in New York, a missing notebook was being held like a detonator, and the hand holding it had already proved it was willing to kill. Chapter 6. A courthouse is a temple that runs on paper and electricity. The paper gets the speeches. The electricity gets the truth. By mid-afternoon, Kramer had the building locked down in the way only a homicide investigation can lock down a public institution, with irritated uniforms, clipped voices, and everyone suddenly remembering urgent errands elsewhere. He also had my presence tolerated rather than welcomed, which in Kramer language counts as affection. Wolf, safely at home with his orchids and his beer, had given me a clear instruction: find out how the door log lied. Find out why the bailiff rewrote time. Find out who had motive to bury a sealed case and the nerve to arrange a corpse like a warning sign. So I went hunting for electricity. The courthouse office was in the basement, which felt appropriate. If you want to hide a power source, you put it under everyone's feet. The corridor down there smelled like old steam pipes and tired ambition. A young technician in a wrinkled shirt tried to stop me with a hand and a line about credentials. I gave him my best tired look, the one that says I have already spoken to too many people and am not in the mood to be denied. "I need whoever handles the security logs," I said. He blinked. "That's not public." "Neither is murder," I told him. And yet here we are. He led me to a cramped office where the air was warm from servers, and the walls were lined with monitors that showed doors, corridors, and tiny moving figures like ants in suits. A man in his 40s sat at a desk with a coffee cup stained the color of regret. His nameplate said Martin Kelso, Systems Admin. Kelso looked up as if I had just asked him to personally carry the building outside. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Working with Wolf. Also, working with the unpleasant reality that your system says a door never opened when a man got killed inside." Kelso's face tightened. "The system doesn't lie. That's one of your more hopeful statements," I said. "Can it be edited?" Kelso bristled. I watched his eyes when he said no. They flicked left, then came back. That told me the no was not a fact. It was a reflex. "Kelso," I said, "this is not a courtroom. You do not get points for confidence. I'm asking because the log shows no entry, but the door was locked and unlocked normally. That means either the killer walked through the wall or your log is editable." Kelso's jaw worked. "It's not editable by staff." "That's not what I asked," I said. "Is it editable?" Kelso's shoulders rose and fell, with the right privileges. "Thank you," I said. "That wasn't painful. Keep going." Kelso's voice turned defensive. "It's controlled. Only administrators." "Name them," I said. He hesitated. "Me, 2 others." I leaned forward slightly. "Could Owen Pike do it?" Kelso stared at me, then looked down at his keyboard as if it might provide cover. Pike was not it. He was a clerk, I said. Clerks have access to things they shouldn't, because everyone assumes clerks are harmless. Could he edit logs if he had a password? Kelso's mouth tightened. If he had an administrator password, yes. "Did he?" I asked. Kelso's eyes flicked again. This time they flicked toward a file folder on his desk. I said, "Kelso." He swallowed. "There was an incident." "What incident?" I asked. Kelso exhaled sharply. "Last month Pike came down here with an access request. He said Judge Heller's chamber's sensor was glitching, and he needed the entry report to show the judge it was fixed. He had a work order form." "A real work order?" I asked. Kelso hesitated. "It had the right code and a signature stamp. It looked real." "And you gave him what?" I said. Kelso's voice lowered. "Temporary access, read, only." I waited. Kelso's face tightened. He asked about why certain entries looked odd. He said he needed to understand the way the system recorded. I explained. He asked if entries could be corrected if there was a false trigger. "And?" I said. Kelso swallowed. I told him corrections require an administrator password. And then, I said. Kelso's eyes closed briefly. He guessed it. I stared. He guessed it. Kelso opened his eyes, miserable. He asked me something about my kid, about school, about my coffee, and while I answered, he watched me type. I didn't think. He wasn't supposed to be a threat. Wolf would have called that not thinking a form of cooperation. So Pike had your password, I said. Kelso nodded once. Small, I changed it later, but yes, for a time, he had it. Enough time to edit a log, I said. Kelso's shoulders sagged. Yes. Did you tell Kramer? I asked. Kelso's face tightened. Not yet. Then you will, I said, letting my voice go hard. Because a man is dead and your silence makes you part of the staging. Kelso swallowed. I didn't kill him. I know, I said. But you helped the killer hide, by accident or by laziness. Choose which story you want to live with. I left him staring at his monitors like they had become a jury. Upstairs, in the bright ugliness of the main floor, I found my next clock. Bailiff Reardon was not hard to locate. A man who drinks on duty leaves a trail. I asked a uniform, who looked tired and got a resigned point toward a stairwell landing near the service entrance. Reardon was there, slumped on a bench, his cap on the floor, his face flushed, his breath thick with cheap whiskey and fear. Fear smells different than whiskey. Whiskey is blunt. Fear has edges. I sat beside him without asking permission. Reardon, his head jerked up. His eyes were bloodshot. Who the hell are you? Archie Goodwin, I said. I'm the man who notices when you rewrite time. Reardon's jaw clenched. I didn't rewrite anything. Sure, I said. You just invented an extra half hour of life for a corpse. Reardon's gaze flicked away. Then back. I saw him. You saw someone, I said. Maybe you saw Pike. Maybe you saw a stand-in. Maybe you saw nothing and you were told to see it. I'm here to pick which one. Reardon swallowed and looked down at his hands. His fingers trembled slightly. That is not a sign of a man confident in his memory. Leave me alone, he muttered. I kept my voice low. Who paid you? Reardon's head snapped up. Nobody. Second no today, I said. You want to use a third. Reardon's shoulders sagged. His voice dropped. I didn't want trouble. Then why are you drunk on a courthouse bench? I asked. His laugh was bitter. Because trouble already found me. Who? Reardon swallowed. It wasn't supposed to be like this. There it is, I said. It wasn't supposed to be like this, meaning you were given a plan. Reardon's eyes squeezed shut for a second. When he opened them, they were wet and angry. They told me to say it. Who? I asked. Reardon's mouth tightened. A woman. I felt my pulse tighten. Grey coat. Reardon blinked. Yeah, grey coat. Nice, cold eyes like she could file you away. She said, you were on duty. You were on duty. You will remember seeing him. I kept my face neutral. She rehearsed you. Reardon nodded, ashamed. She made me say it back, over and over. 9:10, 9:15. He nodded. He went to the copy room. She said if I said it right, I'd be safe. Safe from what? I asked. Reardon's voice cracked. From being blamed, from losing my job, from going down with the rest of them. I leaned closer. Did she pay you? Reardon hesitated, then dug into his pocket with clumsy fingers and pulled out a folded wad of bills. He held it like it had burned him. She said it was for my trouble, he whispered. She said, if I told the story, nobody would look at me. I believed her. I nodded slowly. And now you're scared. Reardon's mouth twisted. Because the clerk is dead, because I thought this was just covering a screw-up. I didn't think it was murder. I watched his face and felt a cold certainty settle. Reardon was not clever enough to invent this. He was not brave enough to maintain it without support. He was a prop. Reardon, I said, you're going to tell Kramer the truth, and then you'll be the next body in a room that supposedly never opens. Reardon stared at me, breathing hard. Then he nodded once, small and desperate. I left him there with his whiskey and his fear, and went outside into the winter air for one deep breath. The city smelled like exhaust and cold stone. Across the street, men hurried with collars up, faces down, pretending their lives were simple. I called Wolf from the sidewalk because I needed his mind before I went back into Kramer's. Wolf answered on the second ring. Archie. Security logs can be edited, I said. Kelso, the it man, admitted it. Needs the right password. Pike got it by watching Kelso type. Pike had the ability to alter entries for a time. Wolf was silent a beat. Good. That explains the impossible detail. Continue. Bailiff Reardon was paid, I said. He's drunk and frightened. A woman in a grey coat rehearsed him on the timeline, made him repeat it, paid him cash. Wolf's voice turned colder. So she is not merely a coat, she is a manager. Yes, I said. He says she was cold, eyed, and professional, like she could file you away. Wolf said, bring Reardon to Kramer. I will, I said, but I need your next move. Wolf's voice stayed calm. I have already made it. There was a faint rustle on his end, paper perhaps. Wolf does not shuffle paper without purpose. I have the holiday party list, he said. The courthouse party, the one that made Pike nervous. I have circled 3 names with motive to bury a sealed case. I waited. The lawyer, Dean Lark, Wolf said. The donor, Conrad Bexley, and the judge's own aide, Lena Voss. I blinked. Voss. Yes, Wolf said. Not the therapist from your last affair, Archie. A different Voss. Lena, she is Judge Heller's administrative aide. Efficient, trusted, and well-placed to touch schedules, documents, and key cards without raising suspicion. My mouth went dry. So the woman in the grey coat could be Lena Voss. Possibly, Wolf said, or someone she employs. But you now have a rehearsed timeline and a method for editing logs. Those are administrative tools, not the tools of a lawyer or a donor. I nodded, even though he could not see it. And Dean Lark. Wolf's voice stayed calm. Dean Lark is the man who can remove consequences. Conrad Bexley is the man who can apply pressure. Lena Voss is the one who can move quietly inside the courthouse without being seen. I said, Wolf, why would a judge's aide help bury a sealed case? Wolf replied, because she may be protecting the judge, protecting herself, or protecting someone who owns her future. I thought of the hidden compartment behind the courthouse photo, emptied recently, of the keycard to the garage, of Pike's burned ledger page in the sink, of the missing notebook. Now, a detonator in someone's hand. Wolf's voice softened slightly, into the tone he uses when he is stating a rule. Not a fact, Archie, he said. When a court wants quiet, the killer hides in the silence they've been given. I swallowed. So we stop giving silence. Yes, Wolf said. Bring noise. Bring Reardon to Kramer. Then go see Judge Heller's aide. Lena Voss, I said. Yes, Wolf replied. And Archie. Yes. Do not go alone, Wolf said. That was Wolf being thoughtful in his own harsh way. When Wolf tells me not to go alone, it means he expects a door to close behind me. I said Saul or Durkin. Saul, Wolf replied. Durkin is occupied for the moment. Saul will meet you at the courthouse. Proceed. I ended the call and went back inside. Kramer was in a conference room, jaw clenched, listening to a tech explain log integrity with the strained patience of a man who wants criminals, not computer terms. When he saw me, he growled. What now? Your bailiff lied, I said. He was paid and rehearsed. A woman in a grey coat fed him the timeline. He'll talk if you pull him in before the whiskey kills his courage. Kramer's eyes narrowed. A woman, yes, I said, and the door logs can be edited. Pike had access, it confirmed. Kramer stared at me for a long moment, then stood. Bring Reardon. I went to get him. Reardon looked worse, but his fear was sharp enough now to cut through the alcohol. 2 uniforms escorted him into Kramer's room. Reardon started talking almost at once, because frightened men either confess or run, and he had no place to run. While that began, Saul Panzer arrived in the corridor like a quiet shadow. He nodded to me. "Wolf called," Saul said. "He wants us to speak to Lena Voss." I nodded. Grey coat, cold eyes, administrative tools. It fits. Saul's face remained calm. "We should assume she expects company. Then we'll disappoint her," I said. We walked toward the administrative offices, where aides sit behind desks and manage the flow of judges like blood through an artery. Lena Voss's office was on the same floor as Heller's chambers, tucked behind a frosted glass door with a nameplate that looked innocuous. Lena Voss, judge's aide. He stopped outside the door and listened. No voices, no movement, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of courthouse footsteps. Saul stood beside me, calm, ready. I raised my hand to knock. The door opened from inside before my knuckles touched it. Lena Voss stood there in a grey coat. Chapter 7. If you ever want to know whether a person is guilty, don't ask them if they did it. Ask them how much they enjoy being seen. Lena Voss enjoyed being seen exactly as much as a knife enjoys being admired. She preferred function. She preferred shadows with schedules. When she opened that door in her grey coat, I had a fraction of a second to appreciate how neatly the world sometimes confirms your suspicions. Grey coat, cold eyes, voice that sounded like she had spent years telling people what they were allowed to do. She looked at me, then at Saul, and not one muscle in her face moved. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I was told you were in the building." Saul's eyebrows lifted faintly, the closest he comes to reaction. "Of course you were told," I said. "Courthouses don't gossip, they circulate." Lena's eyes flicked toward the corridor. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should murder," I replied. "Yet it keeps showing up." Her mouth tightened. "I have nothing to say without counsel. That's a popular sentence this week," I said. She started to close the door. Saul's hand moved, not touching her, just resting against the door edge, so it could not shut. He did it politely. Polite strength is Saul's specialty. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. "Remove your hand." Saul's voice was calm. "We only want a minute." Lena stared at him. "Who are you?" Saul gave her a name, and it landed in the air like a quiet warning. People with experience know Saul's reputation even when they pretend they don't. Lena's eyes shifted back to me. "This is harassment." "It's inquiry," I said. "You can make it shorter by answering." Her voice stayed level. "Ask," I said. "Were you at the courthouse holiday party?" "Yes," she replied at once, too fast, like a prepared answer. "Did you speak with Owen Pike?" I asked. She blinked once. "Yes, briefly." "After the party," I said, "did you see him again?" "Number did you pay Bailiff Reardon?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Number." I watched her eyes. No flick, this time, no hesitation, that no had been polished. Saul said softly, "Do you own a grey coat?" Lena's eyes narrowed. "This is absurd." "It's a fair question," I said. "A woman in a grey coat rehearsed Reardon and paid him to lie about the time he saw Pike alive." Lena's face did not change. Her voice stayed level. "Then you should arrest that woman." "We will," I said, "when we identify her." Lena's eyes were steady. "I am not your woman." Saul's hand remained on the door, gentle and immovable. Lena looked at it, then back at Saul. "Move." Saul did not. Lena's voice sharpened slightly. "You have no authority here." I smiled. "That's the beauty of private investigators. We don't need authority. We need curiosity." Lena's lips pressed together. Then she said, "If you are done, leave." She tried to close the door again. Saul allowed it to move an inch, then stopped it again. Lena's eyes flashed. "Miss Voss," Saul said calmly. "Where were you between 8 and 10 last night?" Lena's jaw clenched, working. "I was in my office." "That can be checked," Saul said. Lena's eyes flicked, just a fraction, toward the hallway. "A glance toward escape routes is always interesting." "I am finished," she said. Saul moved his hand away, because Saul does not force a door when he can follow a person instead. Lena shut the door sharply. I turned to Saul. She was ready. Saul nodded. Too ready. Wolf wants reactions, I said, so we give her room to react. Saul's voice stayed calm. We tail her. We did. Lena left the courthouse 15 minutes later, moving briskly, not hurrying, but purposeful. She walked like a woman who had a list and intended to check items off whether they liked it or not. She took a cab, and Saul and I took another. In Manhattan, tailing someone by cab is an art. You have to be close enough to keep them in sight, and far enough to avoid looking like you're auditioning for a role as their conscience. Saul handled it with quiet competence, giving our driver short instructions that made us look like ordinary passengers with ordinary urgency. Lena's cab stopped near a diner on 9th Avenue, the kind with bright lights and tired booths, where cops drink coffee and everyone pretends the coffee is the reason they're there. Lena got out, glanced around, and walked not into the diner, but behind it, toward the alley where deliveries happen and secrets get exchanged. Saul and I followed on foot, keeping to the edge of the sidewalk. Behind the diner, the alley was damp with winter, slush, and smelled like grease and garbage. Lena stood near a dumpster, her grey coat looking absurdly elegant against the filth. She checked her watch, then her phone. A moment later, a woman approached from the back entrance of the diner. I recognized her with a jolt. Ellen Quaid, court reporter, tight hair, neutral face, fear behind the eyes. Quaid looked around quickly, then moved toward Lena, like a woman approaching a sentence. Lena lifted a thick envelope. Quaid hesitated. Lena said something low. Quaid's shoulders sagged. She took the envelope. Quaid's hand trembled slightly. Lena's did not. Lena reached into her coat pocket and produced a small stack of bills. She slid them into Quaid's hand, as if paying for groceries, not silence, cash for inkless loyalty. Quaid's lips moved. She said something. Lena responded with a short nod, businesslike, then turned away as if the exchange were finished. Quaid stood there with the envelope and cash, looking like a woman who had just signed a contract with her own fear. Then she went back inside the diner, without looking behind her. Lena walked out of the alley and headed toward the street again. Saul murmured. "We have our reason." "Yes," I said. "She's buying the court reporter to keep transcripts clean." "Or to adjust them," Saul said. Lena hailed another cab. Saul did not follow this time. Instead, he stepped back, pulled out his phone, and made a call of his own. Saul's calls are quiet and fast, and when he makes one, it usually means another piece is moving somewhere else. "We'll lose her," I said. Saul's eyes were calm. "We have enough, now you call Wolf." I called Wolf from the sidewalk while the winter wind tried to make my ears resign. Wolf answered at once. "Archie, Lena Voss," I said. "Grey coat confirmed." I tailed her. She met Ellen Quaid behind a diner and slipped her a thick envelope and cash. Wolf's voice was flat. "Payment for silence." "Or for inkless loyalty," I said. Quaid took it like it weighed a ton. Wolf was silent a beat. "Good. Continue to observe Quaid. A court reporter's fear is valuable, so is her greed." "I'll tell Kramer," I said. "Later," Wolf replied. "First, allow the trap to form." "What trap?" I asked. Wolf's voice stayed calm. "I am setting one." That was all he said. Wolf enjoys being dramatic when he can claim it is efficient. Saul's phone buzzed. He listened, then looked at me. "My contact followed Lark," Saul said. "Dean Lark met a man in a parking garage, Conrad Bexley's fixer." That made my stomach tighten, and Saul's face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. They traded a flash drive. Lark handed it over. The fixer handed Lark nothing visible, a promise or an instruction. I whistled softly. "So Lark is carrying something digital." Saul nodded. "And he's delivering it to Bexley." I called Wolf again. Wolf answered. "Saul has Lark meeting Bexley's fixer in a garage," I said. Flash drive traded for a promise. Wolf's voice was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear the click in his mind, like gears aligning. "Yes," Wolf said at last. "Now it is clear." "Clear," I repeated. Wolf's tone was calm and certain. Owen Pike's notebook was not merely notes. It was leverage, the sealed case, the evidence tampering, the fixes and favors, the names leverage attracts hands that do not shake. I stared at the street traffic and felt the whole case shift in my head. The notebook was missing because it was useful. Pike was dead because he knew he could use it. And everyone else was moving because whoever held it controlled the next fire, Wolf continued. Lena Voss pays the court reporter because she fears the record. Dean Lark trades a flash drive because he fears exposure. Conrad Bexley uses a fixer because he prefers distance. I said, so who killed Pike? Wolf's voice stayed calm. Patience, Archie. We will encourage the murderer to reveal himself. How? I asked. Wolf's reply came with a faint note of satisfaction. By leaking a rumor. I blinked. A rumor? Yes, Wolf said. This afternoon, certain people will hear that Owen Pike's missing notebook is in my safe. I almost laughed. Your safe? Indeed, Wolf replied. My safe is a magnet for greedy hands and desperate minds. And if the real notebook isn't in your safe, I said. It is not, Wolf said calmly. Then the rumor is false, I said. Yes, Wolf agreed. False rumors are useful when true motives exist. I pictured Wolf's heavy safe, the one in the office that rarely sees action unless Wolf wants to make a point. I pictured someone trying to get into it, thinking they could steal paper and erase trouble. Wolf's voice went colder. Archie, I want you at the brownstone tonight. Saul will be here. So will Inspector Kramer if he chooses to cooperate. We will give the city a whisper and watch who comes running. I swallowed. Wolf, you're using your house as bait. Wolf's tone was calm, almost pleased. I have done so before. My house is sturdier than most men's consciences. The line was pure, Wolf. It would have been funny if a clerk hadn't been stabbed in a judge's office for a notebook we still hadn't seen. All right, I said. I'll be there. Wolf ended the call. Saul looked at me. We go back. Yes, I said. We tell Kramer enough to keep him from stepping on Wolf's trap, and we keep an eye on the court reporter, because she just got paid to forget. Saul nodded. And we watch Lena Voss. I glanced up the street where the diner's bright windows glowed against the grey afternoon. Wolf says the killer hides in the silence they've been given, I said. Saul's voice was calm. Then tonight we make noise. We headed back toward the courthouse, leaving behind the diner alley where cash had changed hands for inkless loyalty, and I couldn't shake the image of Wolf's safe as a magnet. A magnet does not choose what it attracts. It simply pulls, and whatever came to Wolf's door tonight would be the hand that could not resist leverage. Chapter 8. If you live in Wolf's brownstone long enough, you learn the house has two personalities. In daylight, it is a respectable fortress of routine. The bell rings, Fritz cooks, Wolf grumbles, and I run errands like a well-paid nuisance. After midnight, it becomes something else. The stair treads remember every step. The front door listens. Even the wallpaper seems to hold its breath. Wolf was in his office at 11:30, planted behind the desk with a book open but not being read. He had told Fritz he would take nothing more than beer, which was Wolf's version of restraint. Fritz, insulted on behalf of civilization, had left a plate on the side table anyway. Cold roast beef, a neat stack of sliced bread, and a crock of mustard, with the dignity of a church offering. Saul Panzer sat in the red leather chair by the window, relaxed in the way only Saul can manage. Relaxed does not mean unwary. It means he has already counted the exits and decided which one he will use if someone tries to become dramatic. Inspector Kramer had arrived reluctantly, complaining the whole way up the steps, and then had stayed because Wolf had promised him something he could use. Kramer always says he does not trust Wolf. He trusts Wolf the way a man trusts a rattlesnake to bite. I was at my desk with my legs stretched and my mind busy. The false rumor had been released earlier in the evening through channels Wolf approves of, which is to say, channels that carry gossip like a courier carries a letter. The right people were supposed to hear that Owen Pike's missing notebook, the scandal grenade, The leverage everyone wanted was in Wolf's safe. Wolf's safe sat in the office wall like a silent insult to burglars. It was not large, but it was heavy, and it had defeated men who thought muscle was a substitute for intelligence. Wolf spoke without looking up. "They will come," Kramer grunted. "Maybe, or maybe they're not as dumb as you." Wolf's eyes lifted, calm and contemptuous. "If they were not dumb, Inspector, Owen Pike would be alive." Kramer did not answer because that line was too accurate to argue with. The hours crawled. At 12:15, Fritz came down quietly, checked the locks with the patience of a man who knows that disorder is a personal insult, then went back upstairs. The house settled into its late-night hush at 12:48. Wolf closed his book. He did it with the certainty of a man hearing a sound no one else hears. Saul's gaze sharpened. Kramer shifted in his chair, irritated at being affected by the atmosphere. He heard it a second later. Not the bell, not the front door. A faint click from the front vestibule, like a careful hand testing something that should not be tested. Wolf's voice was low. "Archie, I was already moving." One thing you learn quickly about burglars is that they are not romantic. They do not glide. They sweat. They breathe too loud. They make the kind of noise that is invisible during the day and obvious at midnight. I slipped out of the office into the hall and paused at the foot of the stairs, listening. There was a soft sound at the front door, a faint scrape, then the dullest thud, as if someone had pressed a shoulder into wood and expected it to surrender out of courtesy. The brownstone did not surrender. The scrape shifted to the side window in the vestibule. A tool touched glass lightly. The tool withdrew. Another touch. Precise. Patient. Whoever was outside knew the difference between smashing and entering. Smashing brings noise. Entering brings opportunity. I moved closer, staying in shadow. The vestibule window gave a faint creak, like wood protesting. The latch had been worked. The window opened a fraction. A hand slid in. It was gloved. Not a cheap glove. Not a leather glove for warmth. A tight, pale rubber glove, the kind issued in institutions where you handle evidence and pretend it stays clean. That glove told me more than the hand did. The window opened further, and a shoulder appeared. The figure eased himself in with care, moving like a man who had practiced being invisible. He was wearing a dark coat, and on his shoulder was a strap from a bag that clinked softly with tools. He landed inside the vestibule, paused, and listened. I had my gun out by then, because I am practical. I stepped forward and said, "Hold it." He froze, stiff as a statue. Then he bolted, not toward the street, because he had not yet opened the front door. He bolted inward, toward the hall, as if his plan had been to go up the stairs fast and get to the office before anyone woke. That plan was optimistic. I moved fast, too, because I am rude in emergencies. I cut him off at the base of the stairs and gave him my gun again, closer. "Stop," I said, "or you'll learn how expensive my aim is." He stopped. His breathing was loud now, feared as that. "Hands up," I said. His hands went up slowly. In his right hand, still, was his own courthouse. Issued keycard, the kind with a barcode and a court seal. In his left hand was a small tool that looked like it belonged in an IT kit, not a burglar's pocket. Wolf's voice came from behind me, calm and heavy. "Archie." I glanced back. Wolf had come into the hall, not rushing, because Wolf does not rush. Saul was behind him. Ready, Kramer was behind Saul, scowling like a man who resents being proven correct about human nature. The intruder's head turned slightly, and the hallway light hit his face. Martin Kelso Courthouse it man, coffee-stained regret, sweat now pouring from him as if his body had decided to confess even if his mouth refused. I stared. Kelso. His eyes widened. Goodwin, I didn't know. I thought. What did you think? I asked. That burglars get a courtesy pass. Kramer stepped forward, his anger turning sharp. Kelso, you piece of work. Kelso's face crumpled. Inspector, I can explain. Kramer's hand closed on Kelso's arm. You'll explain at the station. Wolf's voice cut in, calm and precise. Not yet, Inspector. Kramer whirled. Wolf, he broke into your house. Wolf's eyes were cold. He attempted to. The house refused. Do not interrupt my inquiry. Kramer's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he also looked like a man aware that Wolf had deliberately placed bait, and now had the fish on the hook. Wolf looked at Kelso. Mr. Kelso, you have issued gloves and a courthouse keycard. You have chosen burglary as a profession. This is a poor choice. Kelso swallowed hard. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Hurting was not required, Wolf said. Only stealing. You came for the notebook. Kelso's eyes flicked, and that flick was confirmation. Wolf's mouth tightened. Yes, you believed the rumor. You believed Owen Pike's notebook is in my safe. Kelso's voice cracked. I had to. Wolf's gaze remained steady. You will explain why. Kelso's hands trembled. They said if I didn't, I'd be the one who got blamed. Who said? Wolf asked. Kelso hesitated. Then he whispered, Lena Voss. Kramer snorted. Voss, the judge's aide. Kelso nodded quickly, desperate. She told me to scrub the logs. She said the door entry report had to look clean. She said Pike had access. And if the log stayed messy, it would point to her and the judge. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You edited the security logs. Kelso swallowed. Yes, Wolf's voice was calm. And you did it because she promised you protection. Kelso's breath hitched. She said, Judge Heller would protect me, that he owed her, that she could make sure I wasn't fired, wasn't charged, wasn't ruined. Wolf's tone was dry. Protection from a judge. Kelso's eyes squeezed shut. I didn't know Pike would end up dead. I thought this was just about cleaning data. I thought it was politics. Wolf's voice sharpened slightly. Politics is merely crime with better clothing. Kramer barked. Kelso, you edited evidence logs during a homicide investigation. Kelso flinched. I edited them before the investigation. Right after she told me, she came to my office. She was furious. She said the log would destroy everyone. She said, you will correct it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. She did not ask, she ordered. Kelso nodded, miserable. Yes. She said if I didn't, I'd lose my job and I'd be blamed for the security failure. She said she had friends in administration. She said Heller would back her. I watched Wolf's face. Wolf was not satisfied, he was thinking. Wolf said, Mr. Kelso, why did Lena Voss need the log scrubbed? The log showing no entry is useful, only if someone wishes to suggest the murderer could not have entered. That is a staged impossibility. Kelso's mouth opened-closed. She said it had to look like no one came in. Wolf's eyes stayed steady. Why? Kelso's voice trembled. Because the truth was worse. Kramer leaned in. What truth? Kelso swallowed. That someone used the garage route? The keycard route? That someone entered from below, not from the hall? The sensor log would not show it if the door wasn't used, but the garage record would. She said those records had to be cleaned too. Wolf's gaze sharpened. You cleaned garage records. Kelso nodded, sweating harder. I tried. I could not erase everything. Some of it is archived. Wolf's lips tightened. Interesting. Kramer grabbed Kelso's arm again. We're done. He's coming with me. Wolf lifted a hand. Wait. Kramer glared. Wolf, I am not waiting while you conduct a lecture. Wolf's voice was calm and heavy. Inspector, you can arrest Mr. Kelso at any moment. First, I require one more answer. Kramer's jaw worked. He nodded sharply. One. Wolf looked at Kelso. Mr. Kelso, Lena Voss is competent, but she is not powerful enough to guarantee protection from a judge unless she holds leverage over the judge, or she serves someone who holds leverage over both. Kelso stared at Wolf, breathing hard. Wolf's voice stayed calm. Which is it? Is she blackmailing Judge Heller, or is she acting for someone above her? Kelso's eyes darted. I don't know. Wolf's gaze did not soften. That is untrue. Kelso's shoulders sagged. She said it wasn't just the judge. She said there were people who would not allow the sealed case to surface. She said if I cooperated, I'd be safe because she had backing. Backing from whom? Wolf asked. Kelso's throat worked. She didn't name him. Wolf's eyes narrowed. But you have guessed. Kelso's voice went very small. Conrad Bexley. The name sat in the hallway like an expensive cigar smoke. Kramer's face hardened. Bexley the donor. Kelso nodded, miserable. She said Bexley's people were watching. She said if the sealed case blew open, careers would end and people would go to prison. She said Bexley doesn't lose. Wolf's mouth tightened. Then the pattern leads higher than Lerner. Kramer pulled Kelso toward the door. He's going. Wolf nodded once, as if granting permission. Yes, take him. Kramer shoved Kelso ahead of him, muttering threats that were mostly administrative. Saul moved with them, calm, to ensure Kelso did not decide to become athletic. I stayed with Wolf in the hall, my gun still out, because I am a professional pessimist. Wolf regarded the vestibule window, now half open, and the winter air seeping in. Archie, he said. Yes. You see, Wolf said, why I do not believe in protection. I nodded. You believe in patterns? Yes, Wolf said. Protection is a promise. Patterns are evidence. He turned back toward the office, moving slowly. The house resumed its midnight hush, as if ashamed it had been disturbed. In the office, Wolf sat behind his desk and took a sip of beer, as if burglars were merely an interruption in his reading. Fritz appeared silently with a cloth and closed the vestibule window with a look that suggested the outside world was poorly behaved. Wolf looked at me. The notebook is leverage. Someone wishes it. Mr. Kelso came because he believes it is here. It isn't, I said. No, Wolf agreed, but now we know who is desperate enough to act. I leaned on my desk. Kelso. Says Lena has backing, Bexley. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Bexley is one possibility. Dean Lark is another. The judge himself is a third. The question is which of them has the missing notebook, and which of them had the sealed packet removed from the judge's wall. And which of them stabbed Pike, I said. Wolf's tone was calm. Yes, and note, Archie, that the murder was staged to appear impossible. The logs were scrubbed to support that impossibility. That is an intellectual vanity. It suggests someone who enjoys cleverness. I frowned. Lark, perhaps, Wolf said. But do not leap. Lena Voss has shown herself capable. She pays, she orders, she rehearses. She may also be willing to kill if she believes she is protecting her institution. Some people commit murder as a form of loyalty. I thought of Quaid taking cash behind a diner, and Reardon repeating a rehearsed timeline like a prayer. I said, so what now? Wolf's eyes were steady. Now we make the rumor more specific. We tighten the net, and we invite our suspects to my office, because I prefer my crimes to be explained where I can sit comfortably. That last line was Wolf in his purest form. A man had died, a courthouse was wobbling, and Wolf was planning his final gathering, like a host deciding the seating arrangement. I looked at the safe in the wall, silent and innocent. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that paper was being fought over like a weapon. Wolf's voice was low. Archie. Yes. When a court wants quiet, Wolf said again. The killer hides in the silence they have been given. I nodded slowly. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Tonight, someone tried to steal my silence. He lifted his beer, sipped, and said, we will not oblige. Chapter 9. Wolf's invitations are never invitations. They are summonses dressed in courtesy, and courtesy is the thinnest fabric in his wardrobe. He sent them out in the afternoon by telephone and messenger, and he did not ask whether the recipients found the hour convenient. He informed them that it was. By early evening, Fritz had performed the small domestic miracles that keep Wolf's house from becoming a police station with orchids. The front hall gleamed, The brass on the banister looked newly minted, and the air held a faint, civilizing trace of something simmered with care. Wolf had refused dinner on principle, claiming the occasion did not deserve his appetite. But Fritz had arranged a tray anyway, set discreetly on the side table in the office. Cold beef sliced thin, bread squared like documents, mustard that looked like it had been placed there by a man who believes morality begins with proper condiments. The office itself was prepared like a courtroom, without the mess of law. The red leather chairs sat ready to receive lies. The desk lamp cast a warm circle, which is the only warmth Wolf will extend to people he dislikes. The safe in the wall waited in silence, an innocent object burdened with the guilty imagination of half Manhattan. Inspector Kramer arrived first, because Wolf had told him bluntly that if he wanted to be present for the truth, he would show up at the time specified. Kramer hates being handled, which is why Wolf handles him so often. "You sent for me like I'm an errand boy," Kramer complained, hat on knee, scowl on face. Wolf's eyes did not move. "Inspector, you are here because your investigation has struck a wall made of influence. I provide a door. I provide arrests," Kramer growled. "You provide arrests after you have the right names," Wolf replied. "Sit down and attempt patience. It will not injure you." Saul Panzer was already stationed near the side door, quiet, relaxed, and alert. Fred Durkin was in the hall outside the office. Arriving late after Wolf's call had freed him from other work, where a man's decision to leave quickly could be reconsidered in a practical manner. I sat at my desk with my notebook open and my nerves politely sealed. Then the parties to Wolf's private hearing arrived. Judge Grant Heller came first among them, stiff, backed, jaw tight, his eyes carrying that weary brightness that comes when a man's reputation is being weighed on a scale he cannot tip. He looked at Wolf's red leather chair, the way defendants look at witness stands. Lena Voss arrived next, grey coat, immaculate, hair neat, posture efficient. She carried herself as if she were walking into a staff meeting. Her eyes, however, were the eyes of someone who calculates risks as if they are expense reports. Dean Lark came in with a smile smooth enough to make a judge feel vaguely unclean. He was one of those men who never appears hurried because his business is making time flexible for other people. His eyes took inventory of the room, including the safe, and then settled into a polite, detached confidence. Conrad Bexley came last, which was fitting. Men like Bexley prefer entrances that make the room adjust itself. He was immaculate, silver, hair, expensive suit, the genial face of a benefactor. He wore wealth the way other men wear a uniform. He looked at Wolf as if evaluating whether Wolf could be bought or merely tolerated. Ellen Quaid, the court reporter, came in after Bexley. She looked as if she had been dragged there by fear rather than obligation. Her eyes flicked once to Lena Voss, then away. Bailiff Reardon followed, escorted by a uniform at Kramer's request, his face washed out, hands fidgeting as if they were trying to erase themselves. When they were seated, Wolf regarded them with the calm certainty of a man about to read a verdict he has already composed. He let the silence lengthen until it began to itch. Wolf believes discomfort improves attention. Then he spoke. "This is not a legal proceeding," Wolf said. "Therefore you may refrain from performances intended for juries." Judge Heller stiffened. "Mr. Wolf, I object to being treated like a defendant." Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. "Judge, your clerk was stabbed in your chambers with a court letter opener. Your dignity has suffered worse injuries than my tone." Bexley's smile flickered. "Wolf, I was told you wanted to discuss a clerk's notebook. I have dinner plans." Wolf looked at him as if at a stain on linen. "Mr. Bexley, your dinner plans are a triviality. Sit still." Lark's voice was mild. "Is this going to be an interrogation?" "It is going to be information," Wolf replied. "You may interpret it as you wish." He turned his gaze to the room. Owen Pike was murdered. His death was staged to appear impossible. The security log was edited to show the chamber door was never opened during the relevant window. Bailiff Reardon was paid to provide a timeline that supported this fiction. Mr. Kelso, the courthouse hitman, has confessed to altering logs at the instruction of Miss Voss. Lena Voss spoke calmly. Those are allegations. Wolf's eyes held on her. They are facts supported by confession and corroboration. You may call them allegations to soothe yourself. Earden's throat worked. He said hoarsely, "I didn't kill him." Wolf's voice was mild. "Number, you merely helped the killer hide. That is a common form of cowardice." Kramer shifted, irritated. "Wolf, get to something I can use." Wolf did not look at him. "You will have something to use if you permit me to finish." He tapped the edge of his desk. "All of you are here for the same reason." He paused. "For a notebook," Wolf said. Bexley gave a small laugh. "This is absurd. A clerk's notebook does not interest me." Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "Then you came for amusement, you may leave." Bexley's smile vanished. He did not move. He did not like being offered an exit that implied. He feared the room. Wolf turned his eyes to the safe in the wall. "This afternoon, a rumor was circulated that Owen Pike's missing notebook is in my safe." I watched the room the way Wolf watches hands. Lark's eyes flicked to the safe, then away, too fast to be casual. Quaid swallowed, reared and stared at the floor. Lena Voss did not look at the safe at all. That last omission mattered. It wasn't discipline. It was certainty. Lena already knew whether the rumor was true. Wolf continued. "Shortly after midnight, Mr. Kelso attempted to enter this house wearing court, issued gloves and carrying a courthouse keycard. He believed the rumor. He came for the notebook." Bexley's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped once on the chair arm, a small impatient motion that betrayed concern. Wolf let that settle, then said, "Now I will correct the rumor." The room held its breath. "The notebook is not in my safe," Wolf said. Kramer made a disgusted sound. "So this was theater?" "No," Wolf replied. "This was bait. It has already yielded results. Now we proceed to substance." He looked at each of them in turn. Owen Pike's notebook never left the courthouse. Judge Heller's face tightened. "How can you know that?" Wolf's voice was calm. "Because those who believe it is mobile behave like men chasing a loose animal. They search outward. They threaten outward. They act outward. Pike did not." Lark leaned forward slightly. "And your certainty comes from what?" Wolf, clairvoyance. Wolf regarded him. "Logic. Pike lived among files and schedules. He distrusted his home, which is why he burned a page in his sink. He distrusted pockets, which is why he did not carry the notebook on his person after he decided. It was leverage. Therefore he hid it where only a clerk would think to hide it." Lena Voss's voice was quiet. "This is speculation." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You prefer my silence. You will not have it." He lifted a hand, Archie. I stood, went to my desk drawer, and took out a manila envelope that had been waiting there like a sealed indictment. I handed it to Wolf and sat again. Wolf placed the envelope on his desk without opening it. "This was retrieved from the courthouse today, with Inspector Kramer's permission and a uniform present to keep the chain clean." Judge Heller's voice went tight. Wolf's expression remained unmoved. "By Saul Panzer, using access permitted by the police and my instruction. The hiding place was suggested by Pike's own signpost." He glanced at me. "The scrap marked sealed." I nodded. Wolf looked back at the room. A torn docket calendar sheet marked sealed was found on the floor in Judge Heller's office. It was not a clue about the case itself. It was a direction. Pike wanted someone to look where clerks look. Kramer leaned forward. "Where?" Wolf's voice was matter. "Of fact, in the tickler cabinet." Reardon blinked as if the word belonged to another language. Quaid stiffened. Lena Voss's jaw tightened by a fraction. Lark's eyes narrowed. Bexley's fingers stopped tapping. Wolf explained, because Wolf cannot resist explaining when it causes discomfort. "The tickler cabinet is the clerk's calendar," Wolf said. "Date, indexed folders, reminders, scraps, the machinery of schedule. Judges do not touch it. Donors do not know it exists. Lawyers avoid it. But a clerk lives there. Pike hid his notebook behind a false divider in the sealed section, between obsolete date cards and unused docket forms. Only a clerk would look there because only a clerk respects such ugliness. Wolf opened the envelope. Inside was a cheap black notebook. He held it up briefly so the room could see it, then set it down with care. "This is Pike's notebook," Wolf said. "Not the small pocketbook found in his coat. This one, the one he threatened to make public, the one that contains fixes, favors, and something more volatile." Judge Heller's voice was hoarse. "The sealed packet." Wolf shook his head once. The sealed packet was removed from the hidden compartment in the judge's wall. That theft preceded the murder. Pike's notebook contains proof of the transaction. Bexley's smile was gone now. "Transaction? You are accusing someone of selling justice." Wolf looked at him. "I am stating that justice was purchased," Lark said smoothly. "A dramatic phrase, not evidence." Wolf did not look at Lark. He turned to Ellen Quaid. "Miss Quaid," Wolf said, "you are a court reporter. Your currency is record. Your fear is not of homicide. It is of exposure." Quaid's lips pressed together. "I have nothing to say." Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "You do." Owen Pike ensured it. Quaid's eyes widened slightly, involuntarily. Wolf said, "Pike made a recording." Quaid flinched. Lena Voss's eyes sharpened. Lark's smoothness tightened. "This is absurd. Anyone can claim a recording exists." Wolf nodded. "Indeed, which is why the behavior of this room matters." He opened the notebook and turned pages slowly. The paper made a soft sound that seemed too loud. "Here," Wolf said. "An entry, holiday party, Quaid, Voss, Lark, conversation near coat closet, recorded." Quaid's face went pale. Lena Voss spoke sharply. "Ellen." Wolf did not raise his voice, but his tone cut. "Miss Voss, you are not in your office. You will not issue commands here." Quaid's hands clenched in her lap. Her voice trembled. "I didn't kill him." Wolf's eyes remained cold. "Number, you helped to sell a case, and you accepted money to remain inkless." Quaid's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Lena Voss, and in that glance was a lifetime of institutional obedience. Then she looked at Wolf, and in that glance was the fear that obedience would not protect her. Wolf said, "Speak." Quaid's shoulders sagged. The words spilled out, as if she had been holding them behind her teeth all week. "He recorded them," she said. "He recorded a conversation, not just notes. He had a device. He told me if anything happened to him, there was a copy." Kramer leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Where?" Quaid swallowed hard. "In the court reporter archive, in a sealed transcript box. He said no one searches there unless a judge orders it, and he said there's a copy too, digital, because paper burns and people lie." Judge Heller stiffened. "Ellen, what did he record?" Quaid's voice cracked. "He recorded talk about the sealed case. He recorded Lena saying the logs would be scrubbed. He recorded Dean Lark talking about making it disappear. He recorded someone saying the sealed case was sold." The room tightened like a fist. Conrad Bexley moved. It was not subtle. He surged up from his chair and lunged toward Wolf's desk, toward the notebook, toward the source of his ruin. It was not the motion of an innocent man startled by nonsense. It was the motion of a man trying to stop a thing from existing. Saul Panzer moved like a door slamming shut. Durkin stepped in from the hall. Bexley's arm was caught. His body turned. His expensive suit wrinkled in a way money cannot repair. Bexley struggled, face flushed, eyes furious. "Let go," he snapped. Saul's voice was calm. Number Kramer was on his feet, barking. "What are you doing?" Wolf did not rise. He watched Bexley with the faint contempt of a man observing an exhibit. "Motion," Wolf said softly, "betrays motive before words can." Bexley glared at him. "You have no proof." Wolf's eyes were cold. "You just provided some." He turned his gaze to Kramer. "Inspector, you will obtain the original recording from the court reporter archive at once. The original, because copies can be questioned." Kramer's jaw clenched. I will. Wolf looked back to the room, and his voice became mild, which is never a good sign. And now, Wolf said, we will complete the matter. Owen Pike was killed for leverage, staged for symbolism, and timed for misdirection. The question remaining is simple. Judge Heller's voice was thin. What question? Wolf's eyes settled on Lena Voss, and for the first time her composure looked strained, as if she were holding her breath to keep the world from shifting. Wolf said, who held the letter opener, and who believed a courthouse could be owned. I rose quietly and moved toward the door, because Wolf had just asked for silence to be removed from the room, and someone was going to try to escape it. Chapter 10. Wolf does not enjoy endings. He enjoys completion. There is a difference, and if you have watched him finish a meal, you know it. Satisfaction comes only when the last bite was inevitable. The office, for once, looked less like a room in a West 35th Street brownstone, and more like a chamber where reputations were being arraigned. Conrad Bexley stood pinned between Saul Panzer and Fred Durkin, his expensive suit creased in places money cannot smooth. Dean Lark sat very still, as if stillness could be billed as innocence. Lena Voss had remained seated, back straight, grey coat neat, eyes cold, the face of a woman who believed order was a virtue even when it was purchased. Judge Heller looked like a man who had swallowed a brick and was now trying to breathe around it. Ellen Quaid's hands were clenched in her lap, and Bailiff Reardon stared at the floor, as if it might offer him a hole large enough for self-respect. Inspector Kramer was on his feet, restless, wanting handcuffs and not wanting Wolf's lecture. He got the lecture anyway, because Wolf gives what he considers necessary and leaves desire to other people. Wolf rested his hands on the blotter and regarded them all as if they were exhibits that had disappointed him by being human. Sit down, Inspector, Wolf said. Kramer's scowl deepened. I'm fine standing. You are fine standing. Wolf replied. And I am fine sitting. Sit anyway. Your impatience does not accelerate truth. Kramer sat with a grunt because he wanted the conclusion more than he wanted dignity. Wolf's gaze went to Bexley. Mr. Bexley, Wolf said, your movement. A moment ago was revealing. It was also foolish. Bexley's voice was tight with anger. You have no right to restrain me. You are not restrained, Wolf said calmly. You are merely prevented from damaging my property and worsening your position. That is a courtesy you have not earned. Bexley's eyes flashed. This is outrageous. Wolf nodded slightly. Outrage is common among men who are accustomed to purchase. He turned his head, just enough, and his eyes landed on the black notebook, lying open on his desk. This began, Wolf said, with a sealed construction fraud case tied to a city contract. It continued with evidence tampering, and a clerk who discovered that paper can control men who wear robes. Judge Heller stiffened. The seal was legal. Wolf did not look at him. A legal seal can be used for legal reasons or for concealment. Your difficulty, Judge, is that you allowed your seal to be used for the second. Heller's jaw clenched. You do not understand the pressures. I understand them perfectly, Wolf replied. They are the pressures of cowardice dressed as prudence. That landed because it was true enough to sting and blunt enough to be useful, Wolf continued. Conrad Bexley had interest in the contract. Not merely financial, influence interest, reputation interest, the sort of interest that makes a man believe he can purchase outcomes. Bexley's voice went sharp. You are making accusations. I am describing a pattern, Wolf replied. Patterns are not insults, they are evidence. He shifted his gaze to Dean Lark. Mr. Lark, Wolf said, you were paid to steer the sealed case. Lark's smile appeared briefly, polite and brittle. Steer, a charming word. I provide legal services. You provide outcomes, Wolf said. You are known for making charges vanish. That does not happen by prayer. It happens by leverage applied to weak points. Lark's eyes narrowed. You have no proof that I had anything to do with this murder. Wolf nodded once. We will arrive at the murder. We must first establish the machinery. He turned to Lena Voss. Miss Voss, Wolf said. You managed the judge, not by force, but by access. You controlled schedules, files, and the flow of information. You made certain facts reach him, and you made others disappear. Lena Voss's voice was cool. I did my job. You did more, Wolf replied. You paid Miss Quaid for silence. You rehearsed Bailiff Reardon. You ordered Mr. Kelso to scrub security logs. You promised protection to those who obeyed. Lena's chin lifted. Protection is not a crime. It becomes one when it is purchased with lies, Wolf said. Ellen Quaid made a small sound. It was not a sob, but it was close enough that the word would have been convenient. Wolf looked at her. Miss Quaid, Wolf said, you accepted money. Quaid's voice trembled. Yes. For what? Wolf asked. Quaid swallowed. To keep my mouth shut. To keep transcripts clean. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Clean, a useful word for dirty work. Judge Heller's voice cracked, sharp with disbelief and pain. Ellen, you took money. Quaid flinched. I was scared. Wolf's tone was calm. Fear is not uncommon. It is rarely admirable. He turned to Reardon. Bailiff Reardon, Wolf said, you were paid to move the time of death on paper. Reardon's voice came out cracked and thin. Yes, Kramer's voice was harsh. By who? Reardon glanced at Lena Voss, then away, as if his eyes had been burned. A woman, grey coat. She made me repeat it. 9:10, 9:15, like I was reciting a pledge. Wolf nodded once. Thank you, that is enough. He leaned back slightly, and the room leaned with him because when Wolf changes posture, he changes direction. Now, Wolf said, we address Owen Pike. The name made Quaid stiffen. Wolf continued. Pike discovered tampering in the evidence chain for the sealed case. He found the hidden compartment behind the courthouse photograph in Judge Heller's chambers. He found proof that the chain of custody documents had been altered. Heller's face went grey. He showed me pieces. Yes, Wolf said. And then he became ambitious. Pike kept 2 records. One was a pocket ledger of small fixes and favors, the kind of corruption that becomes routine. The other was his true notebook, the one hidden in the tickler cabinet, containing names, dates, and the skeleton of a larger bargain. I watched Heller's face as he listened, and it was the face of a man realizing that the dirt under his fingernails had been dug there by someone else. But he had still let it remain. Wolf's eyes shifted to Heller. Judge, Wolf said, you hired me to retrieve the notebook before Pike made it public. Heller's jaw tightened. I hired you to prevent chaos. You hired me to prevent embarrassment, Wolf replied. Do not decorate it, Heller snapped. If that notebook hit the press, convictions would be attacked. The court would become a circus. Wolf's voice was cold. A court that relies on concealment is already a circus. It has merely kept the clowns off the street. The judge's shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked older than any man should look inside his own courthouse. Wolf continued. Pike threatened you because he believed he had leverage. He did. Leverage makes men intoxicated. It also makes them targets. Bexley snorted. So the clerk was blackmailing the judge. That is your grand revelation. A petty criminal met his end. Wolf looked at Bexley with contempt, so mild it felt surgical. Pike was blackmailing. That is true. It is also irrelevant to your innocence. Bexley's face hardened, Wolf said. The sealed packet was removed from the hidden compartment before the murder. That was a theft. Pike's death was an accompaniment to that theft. The motive was not merely to kill Pike. It was to control what Pike knew and to prevent him from using it. Lark's voice was controlled. You are still circling. Who killed him? Wolf's eyes narrowed. You did. The room tightened. Quaid's breath stopped. Reardon's shoulders hunched. Heller's face turned sharply toward Lark. Lena Voss's expression did not change, which was its own kind of confession. Lark laughed softly, the way lawyers laugh when they think laughter is evidence. This is absurd. You have no proof. Wolf nodded once. You misunderstand, Mr. Lark. I have proof. What I have not done until now is place it in your lap. He looked at Saul. Saul. Saul stepped forward and set a small sealed evidence bag on Wolf's desk. Inside it was a flash drive, the kind that looks harmless until it carries the weight of a prison sentence. Lark's eyes flicked to it and stayed there too long. Bexley's jaw clenched. Wolf tapped the bag lightly. This drive was obtained from Mr. Bexley's fixer. It contains scanned copies of altered custody forms and a file of audio, a copied extract of Pike's recording, the version trafficked for leverage. The original remains sealed in the court reporter archive. Kramer leaned forward, eyes burning. You have that. I have it, Wolf said. And you will have it officially the moment you stop glaring and start listening. Kramer's mouth tightened, but he did not argue. A hungry man does not insult food. Wolf returned his gaze to Lark. The murder weapon, Wolf said, was a court letter opener, not a kitchen knife, not a gun, not an object brought from the street. A court letter opener, that is symbolism, and symbolism is a lawyer's vice. It frames the institution. It makes the murder look like the court stabbed itself. Lark's voice was sharp. That is speculation. Wolf shook his head slightly. Number it his personality. You enjoy cleverness. You enjoy seeing your ideas become real. You also enjoy leaving no fingerprints. Therefore you used court-issued gloves. Kelso had warned them. Lark would have access to them through courthouse contacts. Voss could arrange them. Wolf did not need to say all of that. The room already understood, and so did Lark, which is why his face had turned tight. Wolf continued. Miss Voss lured Pike into Judge Heller's chambers. The pretext was likely the sealed packet. Pike believed he was about to bargain, perhaps to recover it, perhaps to exploit it further. He arrived. Mr. Lark confronted him. Pike realized he was no longer negotiating with frightened bureaucrats. He was obstructing men who feared prison. Heller's voice cracked. Lena, did you call him? Lena Voss finally spoke with something like irritation. Judge, you wanted quiet. I managed quiet. Heller flinched as if struck. Wolf looked at Heller. There, that is your epitaph for this affair. You wanted quiet, and you hired me for quiet. Quiet is what allowed a murderer to operate. Heller's face tightened. I wanted a cover. Up, not a murder. Wolf's tone was calm, almost weary. Secrets do not stay small when fed. You fed them, they grew teeth. Bexley surged again, but Saul and Durkin held him without drama. Bexley's voice came out furious and thin. You cannot prove I ordered anything. Wolf looked at him. Mr. Bexley, you did not order with words. You ordered with money. You paid Mr. Lark to steer the sealed case. You paid Miss Voss to manage the judge, and through your people you encouraged the alteration of records to support whatever story was required. Kramer stood up, decisive now. That's enough, Lark. Voss, Bexley, you're coming in. Lark's smoothness tried one last time to reassert itself. Inspector, this is outrageous. I want counsel. You'll get counsel, Kramer said, after you get booked. Durkin took Lark's arm. Saul kept Bexley contained. A uniform stepped in to take Lena Voss. Lena stood without fuss, grey coat still neat, eyes still cold. She looked at Wolf as if trying to memorize him for future resentment. You think you're saving something, she said. Wolf regarded her. I am not saving anything. I am merely stopping you from breaking more. As the room began to drain of criminals and fear, Wolf spoke again, directing his words to Judge Heller. Judge Heller, Wolf said. Heller turned, face hollow. Wolf's eyes were steady. You asked me to solve it clean and solve it quiet. Heller swallowed. Yes. Wolf's voice was firm. I have solved it clean. Quiet is not mine to give. Quiet was what you demanded, and quiet was what enabled the knife. Remember this. A court collapses faster from lies than from scandal. Heller stared at him, and for a moment he looked like a man who had finally been sentenced by someone he could not ignore. Kramer herded the suspects out, already talking into his phone, because once a machine like the police starts moving, it does not stop for human feelings. Quaid followed, shaking because she would be a witness now, whether she wanted to be or not. Reardon followed, pale and relieved and ruined. When the door finally closed and the brownstone settled back into its usual hush, Fritz appeared to straighten a chair that did not need straightening. Fritz restores order the way other men pray. Wolf sat back, lifted his beer, and took a slow sip. I leaned on my desk, feeling the slackness that comes when the case ends and the body remembers it has been tense for days. "So," I said, "we made noise." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "We removed silence." "That's one way to say it," I replied. "The courthouse will hate us." Wolf's mouth tightened. "The courthouse should hate itself." I looked at the safe in the wall, still closed, still innocent, still a magnet for greed. "Pike hid his notebook like a clerk," I said. Wolf nodded. "And died like a fool who believed leverage is protection." I thought of Pike, nervous after the holiday party, burning a page in his sink, believing he could bargain with men who buy outcomes. "Do you think Hella will survive?" I asked. Wolf regarded me. "He will survive in the way a man survives after a fall, with bruises, with reduced arrogance, possibly with a memory." Fritz cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Wolf, shall I bring your dinner now?" Wolf glanced at the tray, then at Fritz, and then he did something close to indulgence. "Yes," Wolf said, "bring it." Fritz went out, satisfied that civilization had resumed. Wolf looked at me once more, voice quiet. "A court," Wolf said, "is a promise. When men sell the promise, the building becomes theater. When men lie to preserve the theater burns." I nodded and went to lock the front door, because New York never runs out of people who think they can enter quietly. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the brownstone returned to its schedules, and downtown, in a courthouse that would soon have to face daylight, the truth began, finally, to make noise.